Okay, go ahead.
5. Good afternoon. The Open Public Meeting Law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications at Xfinity Channel 24, RCN Channel 13, and Verizon Fios Channel 1962, and live stream at www.boston.gov/cable. This is the August EDIC meeting doing business as the BPDA, which is being held virtually to ensure the safety of the public, staff members, and the BPDA board members during the COVID-19 situation. I'm going to do a roll call of the board members. I, Michael Monahan, is present. Ms. Downs?
Present.
Dr. Lansman?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Thank you. 1, request authorization for the approval of the minutes of the July 16, 2020 EDIC meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Lansman?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Okay. 2, request authorization to enter into a license agreement with John Berenson Interior Design, Inc. for use of suite number 302 at 22 Dry Dock Avenue within the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. Maureen O'Flaherty.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. Berenson Interior Design, Inc. has been a tenant of the BPDA at 22 Dry Dock Ave since 1991, and they operate an architectural and interior design business. 22 Dry Dock Ave is a multi-tenanted building consisting of approximately 45,000 square feet. Berenson is located in Suite 302, which is approximately 492 square feet in size. It's a large open space that lacks any type of office build-out, has no central air conditioning, and is cooled by a window air conditioning unit. Due to current economic conditions that are a direct result of COVID-19, Berenson is suffering from considerable revenue loss as clients have cut back on interior design expenditures. Berenson has been a month-to-month tenancy, has been on a month-to-month tenancy at will basis since 2010. The agreement incorporates 3.5% annual rent increases. Berenson has now requested that the BPDA restructure the fixed rent schedule to help with the loss of revenue, since Berenson is not a candidate for the rent deferment program. BPDA staff is here to recommend a license term of 1 year, commencing September 1st, 2020, and expiring August 31st, 2021, with a 1-year option term. Recent market analysis indicates that the current rate paid by Berenson is in line with the market for unimproved, non-serviced Class C office space. The rate will not increase annually by 3.5% as dictated in the current agreement. Rent will remain at $26.57 per square foot for the first year and during the 1-year option term if exercised. Berenson will pay $1,089.37 in monthly rent, and the BPDA will receive $26,144.88 in payments over the potential 2-year term of the lease. BPDA staff today recommends that the restructuring of the fixed rent schedule for Berenson Interior Design. Thank you.
Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Lansman?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion. Thank you. Number 3, request authorization to amend to lease extension with Haymarket Parcel 9 Investor, LLC, for continued use of 3,000 square feet on the 5th floor of 12 Channel Street within the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. Maureen?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Haymarket Parcel 9 Investor, LLC is developing a 212-room hotel Canopy by Hilton in the Haymarket area of Boston, with an anticipated opening date of September 2021. Haymarket Parcel 9 investor began leasing Suite 506 at 12 Channel Street for use as a hotel mock-up on January 1st, 2019. The current lease agreement expires on September 30th, 2020, and the current license fee is $12 per square foot with a monthly payment of $3,000 per month. Per the existing lease, Haymarket Parcel 9 investor is required at their sole cost to install a commercial-grade air conditioning system in Suite 506. Suite 506 is approximately 3,000 square feet in size and is a large, open, unfinished space with no improvements and no AC system. The AC system that was required to be installed was to become part of the premise and retained by BPDA after the lease expiration. Citing unforeseen excessive costs required to install the obligatory AC system, Haymarket Parcel 9 investor has requested that they be relieved of this obligation and instead paid to the BPDA increased lease payments as a condition of removing the air conditioning requirement. Haymarket Parcel 9 investor and BPDA both acknowledge that the initial $12 per square foot rent was artificially below market value and was used as an incentive to get Haymarket Parcel 9 investor to assume the total cost of installing the air conditioning system. BPDA recently updated its market analysis of 12 Channel Street and believes that the market rent for Suite 506 is $22 per square foot. Upon approval of this renegotiation, Haymarket Parcel 9 investors shall make a one-time $60,000 payment to BPDA, otherwise known as a settlement payment, which will serve as a negotiated market rent payment in arrears based on the current market rate. BPDA will agree to waive their air conditioning requirement in exchange for the settlement payment and an agreement to pay the increased rent of $22 per square foot or $5,500 per month commencing September 1st, 2020. The lease agreement will be amended to expire on December 31st, 2020 with one 6-month option term. Today, BPDA staff recommends the restructuring of the lease with Haymarket Parcel 9 investor to remove that AC requirement. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the board?
No.
Seeing none, hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs,
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
and I vote aye with the motion as well.
Thank you.
Number 4, request authorization to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the City of Boston Property Management Department for the use of the municipal protective services at 43 Harkin Street and within the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. John Fitzgerald.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. Staff requests that we continue to use the municipal protective services for security purposes on EDIC property, and that we enter into an MOA not to exceed $677,966 that would extend through fiscal year 21. That concludes my presentation.
Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I vote also aye with the motion.
Thank you.
Number 5, request authorization to enter into a consent, non-disturbance, and adornment agreement with respect to a sub-leasehold mortgage to TB granted by MIL6T LLC, a subtenant at 6 Tide Street within the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. Devin.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the board. For the record, I'm Devin Quirk, Director of Real Estate. 6 Tide Street, also known as Innovation Square, is a 359,000 square foot multi-tenanted research and development facility. The first phase of this project is now complete, and the second and final phase is now under construction. The phase under construction now is ground leased to RBK Tenant 1, a legal entity comprising both the Related Beal and Kavanaugh Advisory Development teams. RBK Tenant 1 is currently completing the lease up of the building. Therefore, the research and lab companies moving in are preparing to finance and construct their subtenant improvements. One such subtenant is Smart Labs, a Massachusetts-based company which offers turnkey, on-demand, pharma-grade research facilities for companies of all sizes. Smart Labs has recently informed the BPDA that it intends to obtain financing in the amount of $10 million to construct improvements within the building. To secure such financing, Smart Labs wishes to grant a sub-leasehold mortgage to Boston Private Bank. The issue of granting sub-leasehold mortgages was not contemplated in the original lease, so BPDA staff have recently completed time-sensitive negotiations with both our tenant and the subtenant to determine the path forward. It's staff's recommendation that the BPDA consent to entering into this mortgage agreement in order to facilitate the job creation and pharmaceutical research outcomes conducted by Smart Labs. In addition, we are recommending that we apply the same financial structure that would have been used if our direct tenant requested a leasehold mortgage. In this case, the fee stipulated in the lease is a 1% of the gross proceeds of financing, and that means that the BPDA shall immediately receive a payment of $100,000 for granting this mortgage. We believe this deal is fair, fiscally prudent, and consistent with our policies for utilizing our property. And we therefore request your authorization to proceed. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good. Are there any questions from the board?
Yeah, this is Brian. I just have one, Devin. Is there any additional exposure to the agency because of the change in the deal?
So if in the event that Smart Labs were to be foreclosed upon by their lender, which we find unlikely, but if that were to happen, their lender would require the sublease, but they'd be subject to the exact same terms that are already in the ground lease to RBK Tenant 1. So no significant exposure that they would be required to fill the space in compliance with the lease.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting aye with the motion. Number 6, request authorization to expend $703,526.25 to the Boston Redevelopment Authority for building number 108 from the EDIC's Brownfield Cleanup Fund and to enter into a grant agreement for said funds. Bob?
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chair and board members. The EDIC used $703,526.25 back in 2010 from the Brownfield Fund to help clean up 6 Tide Street, an old Army facility in need of remediation in the form of a 0% loan. EDIC paid that loan back in 2017, and as a result, the money is now available for grant funding. EDIC proposes to grant that fund $703,526.25 to the BRA in an effort to clean up the old Navy Yard power plant, which is in need of being torn down and is considered hazardous. There is a corresponding memo on the BRA agenda later on to accept this. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Number 7, request authorization to reimburse certain expenditures for the Raymond L. Flynn parking garage and South Jetty Seawall projects within the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park from proceeds of a future bond issuance. Bob? Might have to unmute, Bob, sorry. Here you go.
Good evening, once again, Mr. Board Chair, board members. The concept is to qualify 2 different projects under one bond financing later on in the spring of 2021. One of those projects is currently underway, and that is the capital repairs going on at the Raymond L. Flynn parking garage. This board memo would authorize those expenditures going on today and 60 days prior to today to qualify for the later bond financing deal that we're considering and making. This obligation does not put us in a position where we have to go out and get bond funding later on, but it does help us qualify certain projects that are eligible for bond financing. And the difference in rates is almost 2% between tax-exempt bond financing and regular debt issuance from a bank. So we thought that this is a good idea with what's going on with the marketplace and other considerations that are out there with COVID-19. This gives us an opportunity to act later for today's spending, depending on what the cash flow issue is at that point in time. So again, this obligation is only a qualifier. It doesn't put us in a position where we have to borrow money later on. It just authorizes. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from the board?
Bob, thank you. Do we have any other bonds?
Yes, we have one now, and that's for the BMI Green Parking Garage, and that will be paid off over the next 10 years. Plus, it's a little over $1 million right now for that bond financing. And also on this, the current parking garage will qualify as the security for this bond, potential bond financing later on.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting aye as well with the motion. Personnel? Jamie?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. For the record, I'm Jamie Lamarco with the Human Resources Department. We have some items for your consideration on the EDIC agenda. We have one appointment, Audrey Seraphine, Spark Boston Director, within the Director's Office with a start date of September 2nd, 2020. We have 4 employment services contractors, Amira Awala, Career Coach, Gabriella Jackson, Career Coach, Randy Laufman, Senior Career Coach, and Doris Chow Hannon, Policy and Research Associate. All of those roles are within the Office of Workforce Development. And additionally, we have one departure for your consideration, Tim Sozinski, Senior Project Manager within Development Review, with a resignation effective July 24th, 2020. All of the details to these items are listed within the board memo, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And aye as well. I'm voting with the motion. Number 9, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn the EDIC meeting.
I second that motion.
Motion made and seconded. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting aye as well. Good afternoon. The Open Public Meeting Law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications, at Xfinity Channel 24, RCN Channel 13, and Verizon Fios Channel 1962, 1962. And also live streamed at www.boston.gov/cable. This is the August BRA meeting, which is being held virtually to ensure the safety of the public, staff members, and the BPDA board members during the COVID-19 situation. I'm going to take a roll call. Mike Monahan is present. Ms. Downs?
Oops, sorry. Present.
Dr. Landsmark?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Number 1, request an authorization for the approval of the minutes of the July 16, 2020 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I as well, for voting in favor of accepting the minutes. At this point, out of order, I know the counselor, I just saw her popped up, Councilor Breeden. I believe that you would like to be heard.
Thank you, sir. I would like to be heard out of order to address some of the projects that are in Alston Brighton. Thank you for your consideration.
Floor is yours.
449 Cambridge Street in Alston.
Go ahead, Council.
There's been a very robust community process with regard to this, this project. It adds a significant affordable units. There's been a very a significant mitigation package negotiated with the community. So I am in support of this project as it stands. I'd also like to go on record that the community is very opposed to the concept of a large number of compact units, of which this is an example. So we encourage developers in future not to bring so many of the compact units to the neighborhood. So I'd like to support this project.
Okay, are there any questions from the board of the council? You're good. Councilor, I believe you said plural projects. Do you want to speak on another project?
Yes, the other project is 421 to 425 Market Street in Brighton. I'm in support of this project, but I'd like to ask for a design review. The building is situated directly across the street from one of our historic landmark buildings, the O'Rourke's Pharmacy building. It's a historic landmark, and I'd like the new building to more give some, reflect some of that artistic and architectural quality of the neighborhood.
Is that all, Councilor?
That's no, and there's one more. It is 365 Western Ave. I'm happy to support this project. It exceeds the 13% IDP. It also offers a range of AMIs to reflect the earning capacity of our residents, and I am happy to support that project.
Very good. Are there any questions from the board on those last two projects that you spoke of? Okay. See, and now thank you, Council, unless you have anything further to add.
Thank you so much for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Number 2, request authorization to schedule a public hearing on September 10th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. or at a date and time determined by the director to consider the notice of project change for 15 Necco Street, 5th Amendment to the Master Plan for Plan Development Area Number 69, South Boston, the 100 acres and amended and restated development plan for 5 and 15 Necco Street, South Boston. Are there any questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Number 3, request authorization to schedule a public hearing on September 10th, 2020 at 5:40 p.m. or at a date and time determined by the director to consider 401 Congress Street as a development impact project. Are there any questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Number 4, Board of Appeals. Jeff Hampton?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board. Jeff Hampton, Senior Zoning Planner. Tonight, there are 17 recommendations to be transmitted to the Board of Appeal. 15 of the 17 will be for their subcommittee meeting to be held on August 20th. The reason for the low number, the August 25th ZBA recommendations were approved by the board on the June 11th board package. And then after that, the Board of Appeal will not be meeting until September 21st, so we'll be able to have a larger package for your consideration next month.
Good. Any questions of the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Number
Thank you.
5. Thank you, Jeff. Request authorization to amend the ground lease with CVPA Chain Forge LLC, tenant and redeveloper of Building 105, also known as the Chain Forge building located on a portion of parcel NY-1 in the Charlestown Navy Yard. Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. In December 2017, BPDA and CVPA Chain Forge LLC executed a ground lease for the development of the Chain Forge building into a 230-room hotel. Under the terms and conditions of the lease, the developer would be in default of the lease in the event that they did not both obtain building permits and secure financing by date certain. The board has graciously authorized an extension of time to close on financing and building permits several times since 2017, most recently in April of 2020. In April, the board authorized an extension of time till August 31st of 2020. For each requested extension, the developer paid a substantial fee for the right to extend for a period of time. So these requests have not been made lately. In April, I represented that the developer was in final stages of negotiating with 2 investors to utilize the Federal Opportunity Zone program as a mechanism to entice equity participation. Those negotiations are still ongoing. However, as a direct result of COVID-19's impact on the hotel industry, equity investors and lenders are cautiously refraining from considering new loans until the crisis subsides and new underwriting models are finalized. In short, both equity and financing for new hotel construction is extremely difficult to obtain in the current lending environment. We're requesting permission to extend the deadlines for financing and building permits to February 28th of 2021. Once again, the developers agreed to pay to BPDA an additional fee of $500,000 in this case for this accommodation, which will be incorporated into the lease via amendment. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Good. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Number 6, request authorization to enter into a license agreement with East Coast Engineering for use of a portion of the student parking lot at Bunker Hill Community College. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. BPDA owns the 3-acre parking lot adjacent to the Bunker Hill Community College. It's used exclusively for Bunker Hill College for affordably priced student parking. BHCC has recently announced that the fall semester classes will be virtual. So the immediate demand for student parking doesn't exist at the moment. East Coast Engineering Systems is a well-established construction company located in Cotuit, Massachusetts. They primarily focus on construction debris removal. East Coast has been contracted for the debris removal resulting from the demolition and redevelopment of the Sullivan Courthouse and Middlesex County Jail in East Cambridge, which is not far at all from Bunker Hill Community College. The project is back on track after COVID-related construction delays. They're requesting permission to park 2 construction vehicles and a single metal storage container on a small portion of the parking lot. We are proposing a 1-year term with a 1-year option. East Coast has agreed to pay $500 per month for each vehicle and $750 per month for the storage container. During the initial term, BPDA will receive $21,000. And we are confident that the use will not adversely impact the use of the lot for student parking when Bunker Hill Community College inevitably invites students back for in-person learning. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Good. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Number 7, request authorization to extend the term of the license agreement with Boston Public Schools for the use of a portion of 1, 2, and 4 Palmer Street, 2180-2190 Washington Street, and 2148 Washington Street, known as the Blair Lot, for school department personnel parking. Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The lot commonly known as the Blair Lot is approximately 57,000 square feet located in the heart of Nubian Square. A portion of the lot is routinely utilized for free 2-hour parking for patrons of Nubian Square businesses and occasionally utilized for community uses as well. Last year, the BPDA board authorized the Boston Public Schools to utilize a portion of the lot for employee parking. The lot that BPS generally uses at 2300 Washington Street was unavailable because it was being utilized as construction laydown area for several construction projects underway by the city of Boston in the general vicinity of Nubian Square, including the city's bowling building. The existing license with Boston Public Schools expires on August 30th, 2020. However, the public improvement projects that required the parking relocation are still underway. Projects were delayed, like many, due to the COVID-related construction shutdown. Boston Public Schools has requested an extension of the license for no more than 9 months while the Nubian Square project improvements wrap up. Boston Public Schools will continue to park no more than 60 vehicles. They will continue to indemnify BPDA liability. They will also continue to be responsible for trash pickup and general low-level maintenance of the lot during the license term. We're requesting permission to permit Boston Public Schools to utilize the approximately 18,000 square feet section of the Blair Lot for employee parking. License will expire on or before May 31st, 2021. And the balance of the lot will remain available for Nubian Square business parking and occasional community use. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Dennis, any questions, Dennis?
Just one. My understanding is that these community uses include some weekend activities for community building. Will those activities be impeded in any way, and will they be continuing through the balance of this year?
To my knowledge, they will not be impacted. There's a lot of uses being contemplated right now. So Lauren Fernstein, who's managing the lot, is doing a very good job of making sure that everybody's accommodated. There'll be several uses going on simultaneously in some cases, but I think it's under control.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Dennis? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Number 8, request authorization to enter into a lease agreement with Fenway Community Health Center for use of 2,690 square feet at China Trade Building located at 2 Boylston Street in Chinatown. Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Fenway Community Health Center is a federally qualified health center serving all of Boston's neighborhoods. Its mission is to enhance the well-being of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community through advocacy and healthcare. In June of 2019, BPDA approved the lease terms for occupancy at 2 Boylston Street. The intent was to utilize the space in the basement subterranean level for the installation and operation of an appointment-based HIV testing facility, machinery, and space on the first floor for Fenway Health administrative operations. Fenway Health has received funding from the Commonwealth Department of Public Health to install a sophisticated testing device which will allow patients to self-test and receive results via text within 6 hours. The location of the testing machine within the building, as I said, is in the subterranean section, and BPDA and Fenway, both BPDA and Fenway due diligence confirmed that stormwater infiltration from the street level must be rectified prior to the installation of the machinery. BPDA is undertaking the necessary structural repairs, and completion is expected in February of 2021. Because of the unanticipated time delay in repairs and the significance thereof, the lease had not been fully executed. BPDA and Fenway have been in constant contact and are mutually committed to seeing this important project to completion. We are requesting approval for a change in the lease terms to better accommodate both Fenway and BPDA. BPDA remains responsible to address the building structural repairs and to address the water infiltration. However, Fenway will remain 100% responsible for the cost to improve the rented space to fulfill their operational needs. Basically, they're taking it in as-is condition, which is its basement storage space, so it needs a lot of work, but that Fenway Health would be expending those funds, not BPDA. For budgetary reasons, Fenway has decided to forego the additional expense of leasing the first floor space. We're requesting that the lease be amended to remove the first floor portion of the premises, retaining only the basement portion of 2,690 feet. The lease expiration will be December 2026 with a single 5-year option term. Fixed rent to the basement space will commence in April of 2021, and it'll be based at $16.50 per square foot in its as-is condition. As I said, BPDA will complete the repair of the water infiltration issue, and Fenway will remain responsible for all tenant improvements. In the event that the option term is exercised, the rent for the term will be negotiated for board consideration during the last year of the initial term. A well-earned real estate commission not to exceed $25,000 will be paid to Boston Realty Advisors, who represented Fenway Health and introduced them to this building. During the initial term, BPDA will receive approximately $300,000 in net revenue. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Any questions of Dennis? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you all very much.
Number 9, request authorization to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the City of Boston Property Management Services Department for municipal protection services at the China Trade Building located at 2 Boylston Street in Chinatown. John?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Staff requests that we continue to use the municipal protective services for security purposes on BRA property by entering into an MOA not to exceed the amount of $229,000 at the China Trade Building through fiscal year 21. That concludes my presentation. Sorry.
We're good. Are there any questions of John? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. At this point, I believe Councilor Michael Flaherty has requested to speak on a project out of order due to a scheduling conflict. So, Michael Flaherty, are you there?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Actually, good evening, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the board. I appreciate the courtesy. I hope everyone's staying healthy and safe. I just want to speak on a few items, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chair. Specifically, I believe it's number 17 on the agenda. It involves a project just up the street from where I grew up, 765 East 3rd Street. And since the implementation of Article 68, as you and members of the board know, I've been consistent in my position that new development projects should meet the requirements of zoning from the very beginning when the proponents met with the local elected officials, which was probably, I think, a little over 2 years ago. Mr. and Mrs. Cox, they made it clear that they intended to abide by the rules and wanted nothing more than a zoning compliant project on land that they have owned for over 40 years. And I know the spot well. I used to play Relivio in the lot as a kid. When they filed for their permit, they did exactly that, and they were cited only for the iPod approval. And as you recall, Mr. Chairman, I had put the iPod in on behalf of the community, really to deal with issues when single-family homes were being bulldozed with proposals of 8 to be replaced with proposals of 8, say 9, 10 condo units. And so we did that to sort of protect the community. And unfortunately, we did catch some projects like this in the crosshairs, but nonetheless, when they filed for their permit, they made it very clear that they wanted to do right by the neighborhood. So they'll be, as a result of the iPod approval, they'll now have to contribute 3 affordable units from this project, which would not have been the case had the iPod not been put in place. So during my entire time on the city council, I'm aware of only 2 zoning compliant Article 80 projects in South Boston. This one and the one across the street from it. And because this was filed as a zoning compliant project by 2 people who have given so much of themselves to the South Boston community, they've run a very successful business. They've been great neighbors. I wish to be recorded in support of 765 East 3rd Street residential project. My understanding is there's ongoing dialogue with some of the neighbors and the abutters with some sort of remaining stuff, but not that, and I'm confident that those matters will be resolved. But on the merits, this is something that warrants board approval and to get the project to the next level. So, and then I believe in front of you, Mr. Chairman, there's, I believe there's like probably about, I think it's 18, 19, and 20, I think, right in a row involving the Alston Brighton community. There's obviously, it's a great day for that community with respect to housing opportunities. And so I want to go on record in support of, let me just pull up my docket as I have it in front of me, Mr. Chairman, so that I'm accurate. Yes, it's there are 2 projects in Brighton, which one is, it's number 18, requesting authorization to issue a certification of approval. That's for a residential project, as well as a commercial unit in parking, and then obviously the one below it, 19 as well. Great day for Brighton to create some more affordable housing as well. And obviously the last one in neighboring Alston as well. There's an opportunity there. The developers have gone to significant lengths working with the community. No displacement of any units. They're putting a number of units. I think there's 28 IDP units, which is pretty significant. They've increased their contribution, I believe, to 17% affordable housing. And there is also an additional contribution for affordable housing in the community. So just a win-win-win for Alston and Brighton tonight. And I just want to be recorded in favor of those projects. And I appreciate the work you're doing, Mr. Chair, and the members of the board.
Thank you, Councilor. Is that the pool hall building or something on Cambridge Street?
The last one, it's on Cambridge Street. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Any questions of the council? Seeing none. He was just speaking, so that's out of order, so that's fine. So number 10, request authorization to execute a consultant services contract with UTIL Inc. for Plan Newmarket, the 21st Century Economy Initiative, for up to 24 months in an amount not to exceed $399,000, $942. Ted Schwartzberg, you there, Ted?
Yes.
See you up?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the board. Next slide, please. I'm here to follow up on a presentation that I gave back in December when we initiated the procurement process for the new market planning process. The genesis and catalyst for the new market planning initiative is Imagine Boston 2030, the city's master plan. And as you can see in the map on the right-hand side, New Market is right in the center, and this was identified as a center for future planning around the topics of preserving industrial uses and preserving jobs. This is a particularly interesting project because compared to other planning initiatives that we're undertaking right now that are focused on housing opportunities, often in areas where industrial uses are turning over, per the guidance of Imagine Boston, this one is focusing on the retention of industrial uses. Next slide, please. So beginning with this framework from Imagine Boston of what is a 21st century industrial neighborhood and how do you plan for it, one of the first things we did in trying to answer that question was go to members of the public. So over the last year, our community engagement manager here at the BPDA for this project, Irene Andrew, has organized 22 engagement events with members of the public. So this has ranged from meeting with business associations and neighborhood groups to the image you see on the left. This was a public event that we had at Dorchester Brewing. The idea being that we want to go to where our stakeholders are at rather than expecting them just to come to us. That event took place back in February, which seems like a lifetime ago, And you'll see in the image on the right, we are now holding our engagements online. So we have had, since then, 2 virtual events, chats with the planner, and these online public meetings are going to be our way to engage with the public for the foreseeable future. We also work very closely with our research department to understand the neighborhood. Next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see that a full third of people who work in Newmarket have no college education, so high school or less. And as we begin to think about vulnerable population and whose needs are being served in the Newmarket neighborhood, we see that compared to the rest of the city, people with a range of educational backgrounds are finding employment opportunities in this area right now. And this is a number that it really sticks in our mind, because on the next slide, as you'll see, a lot of these folks are also Boston residents. So if we go to the next slide, so here you see that it's a remarkable number. Actually, 20% of people who work in Newmarket live in the neighboring neighborhoods of Dorchester and Roxbury, and a full 40% of people who work in Newmarket are Boston residents. These are very high numbers compared to, for example, where I work in City Hall. Well, I guess typically right now I'm in my living room, but you know, numbers that we see in the downtown neighborhood are really in the single digits of people who live and work in adjacent neighborhoods. So we're very mindful as we look to plan Newmarket's future, that this is a place where people from Boston and those with a range of educational backgrounds have employment opportunities. Next slide, please. So as we look at these pictures, I'm going to talk through them starting on the left side, going clockwise. So you see on the left side the South Bay incinerator. This was a municipal facility where trash was burned. And in the background behind the incinerator, you see the neighborhoods that I referred to earlier. So that's Roxbury on the left, Dorchester on the left side, Roxbury on the right side in the distance, and a little bit of the south end in the foreground. And Newmarket historically is a place where the city has turned its back upon. You know, this is a place where uses that might not be located otherwise find themselves, and there are positive and negative aspects to that. So as you look at the image on the top on the right-hand side, this is the Atkins Street Engagement Center. So moving more into the present, this is a picture I took about a month ago, and this is a center where I think, as we all know, a lot of folks who are struggling with addiction and recovery challenges can find their services. And then there's a multitude of other needs that are served there. And you know, there are artists that work there, and then the jobs that I mentioned earlier. And looking at the future of Newmarket, which is represented by the image in the bottom right, these urban industrial areas that are located immediately adjacent to city centers are a precious non-renewable resource. So we need to be thoughtful and deliberate about how we plan for these along with our stakeholders. This has become especially important since I was last before you in light of the current pandemic, and as we think about perhaps the future importance of local manufacturing of essential goods and also what it means for shipping and distribution. So on the next slide, please. These are the main areas that we've put in our consultant scope. So as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be driven by economic policy and land use planning, trying to answer the question, what is a 21st century industry neighborhood? How can we bring in future job uses and future industries while retaining the important land uses and jobs that have found their way there in intervening years? What are the public realm and urban design guidelines to support those? So for Newmarket, this is a place where in some areas there are no sidewalks, for example. And how can we improve this so that the area can work for trucks, but maybe if there's someone that's going to be working in a lab, that they can walk from the Red Line at Andrews Square and get to their job as well. That feeds directly into mobility recommendations. And then another important consideration is climate resilience. So this area kind of has a trifecta of threats. There is a threat from flooding from coastal flooding. There's also a stormwater threat because it's a low point in the topography. There's also very small tree canopies, so there's a high risk from heat events. And then in addition to that, there's also pervasive soil contamination from a history of industrial uses. So that's something that's threaded throughout. And to address these first 4 points, we interviewed 9 consultants. We thought that the UTIL team presented an exceptional interview and plan for work with us. They really hit the nail on the head in composing their team, bringing a group that has local knowledge, exceptional local knowledge, exceptional experience in planning for industrial neighborhoods that can accommodate the uses of the past and the future. And then, as we like to say, there's only one Newmarket in Boston. It's a very unique neighborhood, but most other major cities have a neighborhood like Newmarket. And so part of UTIL's team is HRNA, a planning firm out of New York, who recently worked on New York's North Brooklyn plan, which has very similar goals and considerations for an urban industrial area. So that is what's before you tonight. I also just want to note that we are working on an additional consultant that will not come before you. This is a consultant that will come on through a solicitation for written quotes, so that's why it doesn't come in a board memo. But this consultant is a consultant that's going to help us work on social justice and equity impacts. This is a third-party person or firm that will act in an audit-like capacity for us and UTIL's consultant team. And they're going to work with us at a few moments to help understand the social justice and equity impacts of this planning initiative. So they'll review our goals at the outset of the process. They'll work with us as we're planning, and then they'll also review the final plan document. And this is really sort of an epistemological question. How do you know what you don't know? In other words, what are your blind spots in the planning process, and what are the impacts of your planning that you may be missing? And recent events, as we were interviewing the UTIL team, brought into sharper focus that in planning, we do have thorough capacity for understanding things like wind and shadow impacts, traffic impacts, but we recognize that planning activities can perpetuate and exacerbate inequality. And so this consultant will come on board to help us understand what are our blind spots and what are the equity issues that may arise to our planning process, and then how can we mitigate potential negative impacts. So for example, as we talk about new jobs and exciting jobs that may locate to this neighborhood, how do we retain opportunities for folks that I talked about earlier in this presentation? How do we make a public realm that's welcoming to all? So streets that can accommodate the truck driver, sidewalks that can accommodate someone who works in a lab. But what does this mean for someone who's going to get addiction and recovery services? How do they navigate the intersection of Melnia Boulevard and Mass Ave? And then the last question, of course, also is what are the impacts on adjacent neighborhoods? So, if we're changing the mix of jobs that are available, what are the impacts on specifically Roxbury and Dorchester? And then this is also very close to the South End and South Boston. So before you tonight, the agenda is really just about the UTIL contract, but also wanted to let you know that we're putting out this separate, smaller contract through procurement, and then bringing on this second consultant who will work together as we launch this process over the fall. So the next slide, please, and I'm happy to entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Any questions, Ted?
I have a question, Ted. I see we are using the 5 criteria for evaluating companies responding to this type of RFP. Are we going to put diversity, equity, and inclusion criteria onto that list, or are they already in there somehow when you're looking at the respondent team? Or, I really applaud the hiring of a consultant to help us with these issues, but I'm wondering if we can more bake it into our process going forward.
Absolutely, yes. That was not an evaluation criteria for this particular RFP. My colleagues in the real estate department are going to talk a little bit later this evening about how they've made it a fundamental part of theirs. But going forward, certainly it will. And this was a learning process for us. I think what we'd like to do is retain this idea of a consultant working under a separate contract to help us understand what are the blind spots of the main consulting group, so that would be UTIL with HRNA, plus our own work, and have that sort of be a third-party observer. But I think what you just mentioned, that's going to certainly be part of our planning RFPs going forward.
I'm assuming that because this is a third-party contract, which may still be under negotiation, you can't identify who it is, but if you can, it would be useful to know. And you just kind of implied that this party may be on call for other projects of this type. Is that the case?
Sorry, I should clarify the procurement process. So the way that this one would work is that it would be a contract for up to $50,000. And so what we can do is we can shortlist a minimum of 3 firms, and we get to pick those 3 firms. We right now have 4 firms that we're looking very closely at. And then what we would do is we would issue that SFQ, and then we would accept the lowest bidder automatically. So the mechanics of this, and sorry for getting too much into the weeds here, but what I'm asking for tonight from the board is permission to negotiate a contract with UTIL. That process with our legal team will probably take about a month. And then we have the SFQ written. And so the idea was in about a week or 2, we'll issue the SFQ for the social justice and equity consultant. And then it'll be out there. And then as soon as we issue it, actually, then we automatically take the lowest bidder. So the timing is structured so that we will bring on the equity consultant, sign their contract at the same moment that we're signing the contract with UTIL. So those are meant to be synced up, and that is just the nature of the procurement process. On your second question, that would be just unique to this new market process. So this consultant would be working, it would be a 24-month process. So we're mindful of how much we can stretch the budget over a 2-year process. So the SFQ would apply just to this project. And then other projects going forward, my colleagues are already, well, they assisted us in writing that, and I'm grateful for their help, but they're already looking at how they can integrate elements of having a equity and social justice consultant, whether it would be through the main consultant group, like the contract you have before you tonight, or through a separate contract. But it would be a project by project hiring process. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I'm still curious as to how this board would get to know who this equity consultant is.
Well, you know, I'm happy to follow up after this. Typically and this is really a procurement question that's a little bit outside my expertise, but I understand that these contracts that are under $50,000, that the practice is not to bring them before the board. And so I thought it was important to share the information about this process, because I think it's important for the board members to consider that piece of our consulting work in concert with the UTIL contract that's for much higher amount of money that's before you. And I think perhaps, you know, I would be more than happy to keep the board members abreast of our progress on this outside of the board meeting process, if you'd like, and certainly we'd welcome any input.
Yeah, just keep us informed.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Thank you, Ted.
Yep.
Number 11, request authorization to amend the contract with Stantec Consulting Services, Inc. for the Seaport Transit Strategic Plan to include additional transportation planning and analysis services in support of the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park Final Master Plan Update in an amount not to exceed $60,000 and to extend the term. Rich McGinnis.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Director Golden, and Secretary Polinas. For the record, my name is Richard McGinnis, Deputy Director for Climate Change and Environmental Planning. In 2018, the BPDA board authorized the director to submit the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park Master Plan update to the Massachusetts Office of Environmental Affairs for review and approval. This plan is a unique hybrid in that it applies to our real estate. It provides the usual vision of a master plan with pedestrian scale blocks and roadway networks with parcel sizes appropriate for industrial uses. It recommends a mix of uses to encourage growth in diverse job sectors to be codified through zoning
once the state has approved our plan. It provides a public access plan to complement the South Boston waterfront open space system and Harbor Walk where appropriate in the park. It also supports our tenants and EDIC mission for decent wage industrial and manufacturing jobs through the economic development plan and the empowerment zone. It's also a capital plan as it prioritizes projects that support our tenants and projected economic development. And finally, it's a business plan that increases revenue, subsidizes general industrial and manufacturing uses, and allows growth in mixed industrial job sectors. In 2018, the Secretary of Environmental Affairs issued a partial certificate on the NOSA project change for the master plan update, outlining requirements to finalize the master plan. This included a state-managed public process to evaluate the use changes, new building volume, and regulatory changes proposed by the update. This public process was completed last August. The overarching theme of the public process in comment letters was the importance of supporting existing and future water-dependent industrial uses through three specific areas. One was the economic support for water-dependent industrial uses, including capital investments in marine infrastructure, transportation planning and analysis, and third, climate resilience. This past February, the state published a notice that requests analysis and additional material to be submitted with the final master plan update. This includes alternative build-out analysis, potential impacts including transportation impacts on current and future water-dependent industrial uses. The BPDA seeks to modify the scope with Stantec Consulting Services to supplement the transportation analysis that was in the 2017 draft master plan. Stantec will provide transportation analysis in support of the Marine Park Plan. Staff from Stantec actually produced the transportation analysis in our 2017 draft, so they're very familiar with the analysis. Currently, Stantec is assisting us with the South Boston Seaport Strategic Transit Plan that will identify specific recommendations to improve the operations and capacity of the transit network serving Boston Seaport District. The plan will study current transit connections and recommend specific improvements in the short term, as well as the next 15 years and beyond. We've had about 3 community meetings to date under the broader Seaport Transit Plan and are sort of like midpoint in that planning effort. This completes my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Any questions of Rich?
Hi, Rich, I have one question. Are you thinking that this pandemic is going to have a big effect on the long-term transportation challenges in the Seaport, or is it too early to tell?
I think it's too early to tell, but I know that the Transportation Department, the Public Works Department, as well as our transportation team are looking at, essential employees, how they can get in and out of the city efficiently through efficient bus service, dedicated bus lanes, greater bike network for people that prefer to bike in instead of taking public transit. I think as more development occurs here, we're going to start looking at how the roadways support mass transit and shuttles, not single occupancy vehicles, although that's sort of, right now people are driving in their own vehicles. So I think I'm going to reserve judgment on that and see how things play out. But it's definitely on our radar to continue to review.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Any further questions of Rich? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs? Ms. Downs?
Oh, sorry. I said aye.
Oh, I didn't hear, sorry.
I had it on mute.
Dr.
Sorry.
Lindsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Number 12, request authorization to advertise and issue a request for proposals for the development of Pier 5 in the Charlestown Navy Yard. Morgan McDaniel?
Thank you, members of the board. We are requesting board approval to advertise and issue a request for proposals for Pier 5 in the Charlestown Navy Yard. The RFP will include 83,000 square foot pier, 75,000 square feet of water sheet, and a portion of the adjacent harbor walk. The pier was constructed by the U.S. Navy in 1943. Due to its age and a significant lack of maintenance, the pier has deteriorated and is not currently in usable condition. The RFP was informed by a community meeting held in October 2019 with more than 100 community members in attendance. The consensus of the feedback we received was that the community is open to development on the pier that is informed by climate change mitigation strategies and balanced with the need for public open space, preserving views, and preventing traffic congestion. The BPDA will entertain proposals for both maritime uses and non-maritime development that address these community concerns. As a community benefit, the RFP will ask proponents to conduct rehabilitation and historic interpretation of the neighboring Dry Dock 2 pump house. Proposals must also be informed by guidelines for the Charlestown Navy Yard new development area, the city's planning efforts for the Charlestown waterfront, the Charlestown Urban Renewal Plan, and Mass General Laws, Chapter 91. And we're excited to transform this deteriorated pier into an accessible amenity that contributes to the Navy Yard waterfront, and happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions of the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Thank you, Morgan. Number 13, request authorization to re-advertise and reissue a request for proposals for the redevelopment of building number 108 in the Charlestown Navy Yard. Morgan? Or are you doing it, Devin?
Yeah, I'm taking this one.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Again, for the record, I'm Devin Quirk, Director of Real Estate. And my presentation today actually applies to the next 3 agenda items as they all cover the same issue. First, I would like to start by acknowledging that our city and our nation stand at a unique moment in history when it comes to the issues of race, equity, and inclusion in our communities and in our institutions. And at the beginning of the June board, Chair Rojas's opening comments called out the twin viruses of both COVID-19 and structural racism that plague our society today. And I recall that the chairwoman's comments were followed by a call to action from across this board to take whatever steps we can as an agency to advance equity for all. It was in service of this commitment to equity that back in late 2018, Mayor Walsh announced that all RFPs for the redevelopment of publicly owned property would include selection criteria prioritizing the diversity and inclusion in the project teams and both the project and the team developing our property. This resulting diversity and inclusion policy now asks respondents for RFPs for public land to set forth a diversity and inclusion plan that establishes an outreach program aimed at creating increased opportunities for people of color, women, and MBWBEs to participate in the proposed development project. Since instituting this policy, the BPDA Real Estate Department has issued nearly a dozen RFPs for the disposition and redevelopment of our property. In many cases, we have received detailed and influential diversity and inclusion plans. However, in other instances, the plans lacked specifics. We have recently received bids for 3 separate properties where staff found the diversity and inclusion plans to be unconvincing in their ability to meet our desired outcomes. Therefore, I am here today to request this board's authorization to reissue all 3 of these RFPs with the intent of seeking responses with stronger commitments to equity and inclusion. The 3 properties are 516 Main Street in Charlestown, 142 Shama in the South End, and Building 108 in the Charlestown Navy Yard. I want to be very clear that for each of these properties, the BPDA received bids that were from reputable and capable developers, and each bid included many positive aspects. We sincerely hope that these developers choose to refine their bid submissions and reapply. And while we hope that the development community will step up with stronger commitments to diversity and inclusion on these properties, we also recognize that we can do more too. Therefore, going forward, we will refine our diversity and inclusion policy to make it clear that we are seeking plans that embrace MWBE participation across all phases of the development lifecycle, from pre-development team ownership to construction activities to long-term tenants and building operation. In addition, from this point forward, in order to make our commitment to equity abundantly clear, we will weigh the diversity and inclusion plans submitted by each proposal at 25% of our overall evaluation for the award of the property. In closing, I'd like to say that on behalf of our team, the BPDA is deeply committed to finding opportunities to use our work to advance equity and inclusion in our city. We hope that this action today will further the agency's commitment to using public land for public good by offering opportunities for wealth creation and workforce participation for businesses and individuals who have historically been underrepresented in real estate development. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Devin. I'm still going to read into the record those 3 projects, if you can make yourself available for questions. I would guess that those questions would be up now, but I am going to go through each one and read all 3 for the record. So are there any questions of the board of Devin? Excuse me.
Devin, I'm curious. Our work has an impact all across the development and lease-up process. And I understand and very much appreciate that we're taking this initial step. I wonder to what extent this is going to have any impact on the lease-up and maintenance of these parcels once they've been developed. It strikes me, sadly, that all too often when I look through any of the real estate publications, whether they're for commercial real estate or residential real estate that we may have had a hand in developing, that I see virtually no people of color who are involved in any of the lease-up activities, and very few who are involved in the subsequent maintenance activities.
Yeah.
And I wondered to what extent this step that we're taking now can be extended to cover what happens after the buildings are constructed and when they're going through the subsequent lease-up process in a way that would open doors to a wider range of people to participate in that ongoing work of keeping a parcel leased and maintained.
That is an excellent question, Dr. Landsmark, and I think precisely one of the aims of our refining of our language in our RFP. So obviously our RFP comes at the very beginning of the development life cycle, but we are committing to asking as a competitive criteria to who is going to be awarded this property, not just what are you doing in pre-development, who is your team during the pre-development process and the construction process, which is in general very components of the process that are most spoken to in an RFP submission, but also after that, once the building is leased up and is operating, or during that lease up, who are your tenants? Who own the companies that will be tenanting this property? Who owns the maintenance firms? What maintenance firms will we be contracting with, so that the diversity inclusion aspect, the participation in the workforce and participation in the development isn't limited to those early activities, but really limited and inclusive of the long term of the property. So that is certainly our intent, and we're eager to seek feedback on how to do that the best way.
Well, thank you. We'll be watching that very closely.
Are there any further questions of Devin?
Yes, Devin, thank you. I'm wondering how we are going to, once a developer has submitted this plan, how is it going to be followed up? Is it going to be part of our compliance department? How are we going to make sure that the plans are carried out?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't have all the answers because it probably depends on the specifics of the actual commitments of in the proposal. I suspect that some of them might be able to be commitments that are made in the lease, and certainly commitments that are made in the period between when the tentative designation is awarded and when a lease is signed. There's plenty of opportunity for us to ensure that the promises are being delivered. But I think we're asking for creativity to some extent from the development community and how to increase diversity and inclusion. And depending on what those plans are, I think that is what how our compliance component would be answered. But I think you are correct to ask that question. I think it is something we can certainly follow up with our compliance team on.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions of Devin? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Are we moving on the,
No, I'm going to read all 3 of them individually into the record.
okay, sure, so moved.
Second.
So motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs,
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
and I'm voting with the motion as well. Thanks, Devin. Number 14, request authorization to re-advertise and reissue a request for proposals for the disposition of parcel C-24-5 located at 516R522 in 0 Main Street in Charlestown. Now, Devin, this is the second of 3. Okay.
Yeah, that's,
I don't think anybody has any questions, but are there any questions of Devin for this property? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Number 15, request authorization to re-advertise and reissue a request for proposals for the disposition of parcel 5 located at 142 Shawmut Street in the South End Urban Renewal Area. And this is 3 of 3, Devin, correct?
correct. Thank you.
I don't think there's any questions. Are there any questions of Devin? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Thank you very much, Devin.
Thank you very much.
Number 16, request authorization to approve a demonstration project plan for the disposition of 0 Rivermore Street in West Roxbury under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 121B, Section 46F, as amended, and to include said property as an extension of the neighboring urban wild owned by the Boston Conservation Commission, and to execute a deed with the Boston Conservation Commission, and to take all related actions. Ray, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Director Golden, Madam Secretary, and members of the board. This parcel consists of approximately 51,400 square feet of sloping and brush-covered vacant wetland located on the banks of Cow Island Pond of the Charles River in West Roxbury near the Dedham border. It is across Rivermore Street from the City of Boston Archives building, adjacent to an urban wild owned by the Boston Conservation Commission. The parcel is unbuildable and is zoned as open space in the Charles River Embankment Conservation Protection Subdistrict. It is also located in a FEMA flood zone. The BPDA acquired this parcel in a land swap in June of 2005, and since that time has maintained the parcel in its natural state to conform to the condition of the surrounding environment. The Boston Conservation Commission, in conjunction with the Boston Parks and Recreation Department, has requested to acquire, restore, and maintain this property as an extension of the Rivermore Urban Wild for conservation purposes. Accordingly, on July 9th, 2020, the Conservation Commission submitted an application requesting that the BPDA establish a demonstration project to prevent urban blight, to restore and maintain the open space, improve public benefit in the neighborhood, and to foster future economic development by then conveying the property to the care, custody, and control of the Boston Conservation Commission. The BPDA will receive nominal consideration for the conveyance of this property. For these reasons, staff recommends that the board approve the demonstration project application and to transfer this parcel to the Boston Conservation Commission to exist permanently as part of the Rivermore Urban Wild. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ray. Are there any questions of Ray? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I also voting with the motion. Thank you very much, Ray.
Oh, thank you.
Number 17, request authorization to issue a certification of approval pursuant to Article 80E-6, small project review of the zoning code for the construction of 25 residential home ownership units, including 5 IDP units and 36 parking spaces and 25 bicycle storage spaces located at 756 East 3rd Street, to recommend approval to the Board of Appeals for the necessary zoning relief and to take all related actions. John Campbell.
Good afternoon, Vice Chairman Monahan.
Good afternoon, John.
Members of the board, Director Golden, Madam Secretary. The proponent, Puritan Realty Trust, proposed to construct a 4-story residential building located at 765 East 3rd Street in the City Point section of South Boston. The project site consists of 3 parcels that combined are approximately 20,256 square feet of land. The project site has been used for many years to store vehicles related to an electrical contracting business and contain a single-story commercial building that will be raised. The proposed project contains 25 home ownership units, including 3 affordable units and 36 below-grade garage parking spaces. In addition, the proponents have committed $35,000 in community benefits, funding an application for community benefits to support local nonprofits. The proponent filed an Article 80 application on February 13th, 2019. 2 BPDA-sponsored public meetings were held on March 19th of 2019 and September 25th of 2019. The comment period concluded on October 11th of 2019. The proponents, Richard and Joy Cox, were considerate in proposing a development that is zoning compliant, not requiring any zoning relief. They were also very responsive to the community by making a number of changes requested by their abutters. I would like to also thank a couple of my colleagues, Mark McGonigal and Matthew Martin, for their assistance during the review of this proposed project. And at this time, I would like to introduce architect Scott Trenier to further the presentation. Scott?
Unmute yourself, Scott.
There we go. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board. If you go to the start of the presentation, please. So as John had mentioned, okay, I guess we'll start here. It's fine. As John had mentioned, we have 25 units, 3 of which would be IDP units, and 20 at market rate. And as he also mentioned, the 36 garage parking spaces below. The construction jobs, 8.5 million investment, and John also expressed community benefits. Go to the next slide, please. Here we have the locus map of the existing parcels in the existing commercial building run by the Coxes. Next slide, please. With an aerial view of the lot, locus map showing existing commercial building once again. Excuse me, in the existing empty lots that'll be combined. Next slide, please. So here we have the south-facing view of the existing building. It shows the existing grade, which tapers down from the existing street level. Next slide. West elevation, it gives you a better idea of what that grade does look like in relationship to the street, and we do plan on integrating that into the proposed design. Next slide, please. So here we have the below first floor and below parking. Like I said, we're working with the grade of the existing lot. So at the entrance, we're coming in, we have a ramp and we have parking on the ramp. The darker gray area basically denotes the footprint of the building above, and the lighter gray area toward the rear denotes open air parking in the rear of the property. Next slide, please. We have the front elevation. Plan on using a fiber cement siding material, clapboard, going with a larger 7-inch reveal in the lower portion with a 4-inch reveal above, and complementing with a mansard roof on the upper level with composite roof shingles. Next slide, please. So on the left side, we do carry around that same condition around all 3 elevations. And as you can see here, we're also working with that existing grade to design the building into what we have for an existing condition, make it work for the best feasible design that we could come up with. Next slide, please. The same condition on the right side, we have Instead Bay. Go to the next slide. So on the rear elevation, you can see that similar to the other sides, design has been created to work with grading, and we have a small drop in the rear wall to kind of cover up some of that parking below, since we're dropping down another 6 feet. But the lower level does have post and beam work, which leaves the parking area open from inside to out, from the underside of the covered building for circulation to outside parking, and thus up and out to the street level. Next slide, please. Once again, we have the view of the existing commercial building run by the Coxes. Next slide. For an elevation, I guess we can keep going. Thank you. And that's the summary, and thank you. That ends the presentation.
Good. Thanks, Scott. John? Any questions from the board?
Yes, I've got a couple, and I'd like to start out. I took a walk by the site this afternoon, and I know the Cox family has got a fine reputation. But when I look at the proposal, and I spent some time going through the high number of comments that we got from the public, from the abutters, the neighbors, and there seemed to be a common theme that they were very, very concerned about the density. And also the theme was they didn't feel that the requests that some of the neighbors were making were really taken seriously. So, Scott, I don't know if that question's for you, but or maybe John. Through the process, it appears that some concessions were given, but when I look at the project and I look at the concern from the community, I don't see a lot of concessions. So maybe if I could get a better feel for what was given up in terms of density by the developer, I'd feel a little bit better about this project.
I can start with the density question, and I can, defer to John for the latter part. So as far as the density goes, the requirement for the zone for the FAR is 2.0, and we're actually only at 1.71. So we've actually been a little conservative as far as what the allowance was, because this could have been a lot bigger, but Mr. and Mrs. Cox, they wanted to keep this at a reasonable size, the best that they could, and stay within the as of right conditions. But they could have actually made the building, proposed a bigger building, and they actually were a little conservative as far as the FAR goes.
So it's not as massive as it could be, is what you're saying?
Correct. And
that doesn't help me very much, but I see George is on here. Maybe George has some input.
Yes, George Moranci, Mr. Miller. So during the proposal, as Scott said, this is a project that is at an FAR 1.7, which is about 15% of what is allowed by zoning. It does meet all of the dimensional setbacks. There was concern certainly among abutters on the right side about setbacks. The required side yard setbacks in this district are 3 feet. The Cox has increased those setbacks on the right side to 6 feet, keeping in mind that on that right side of the building, it's 6 feet to a property line. From that property line, there is then actually a driveway before there are buildings on O Street, and that driveway provides access to the rear of the buildings on O Street where they enter their garages. So again, it's a building that both in terms of FAR, both in terms of the side setback, is less than what is required by zoning. If there are, still concerns, and I can say actually that there are still conversations between certainly the abutters on the right side of the property and the Coxes and their attorneys in terms of going forward after this. So, those concerns will continue to be taken into consideration. But I think as Councilor Flaherty pointed out earlier when he testified in front of this, I can speak for myself certainly that in terms of doing this now for 23 years, I think this is the second zoning compliant Article 80 project that I've ever been involved in. And this is a result of the fact that Richard and Joy Cox, who've owned the property for well over 40 years, went into this project wanting nothing more than zoning allowed. And as Scott mentioned, they proposed nothing more than zoning allowed. And, in fact, they left about, 15% of the allowable FAR on the table. And 3 feet of building width on the table, in trying their best in good faith to work with their abutters and all the neighbors.
Well, thank you. And certainly representing a development agency, I'm all for development, and I'm much more for reasonable development. So I would just hope they could work a little bit more with the neighbors. There's low cost basis on this property, but I think I've said my piece on this.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, George. And George, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I think now over 20 years between the ZBA and now the BRA. I don't remember the second one that you mentioned, but it's pretty commendable. And I don't know the Coxes, even though I'm an electrician. But I've looked at that property for years, and it just, the development side of me said, when are they going to develop this thing? And I lived right around the corner there at 56P. But so pretty commendable that they're not looking for any zoning, and probably the reason there's not as much give back is because they're not asking for as much from the community. But I read the same things Brian did, and I know, like I said, I lived right around the corner. I know the street well. That single garage door, a lot of the comments, as you know, that everyone's got a position, maybe something in it for them. But I do that single door, Scott, how is that going to work? I know you said there's parking on the ramp. Is it a single door, but what's the width of that door in the garage?
So prior to this point, we did a lot of pre-design consulting with the BPDA, and that has changed quite a few times as far as the approach to that door. But as I understand it now, there's a set standard for a 10-foot wide door, and then the curb cut would be 14 feet with the 2 feet on either side. So it would be a one-way in and out door, unfortunately. But that's what was requested of my firm to present in this design.
So it would be kind of a single curb cut, but the ability to have a car on the ramp, so to speak, wait for the car to come in, and then they could pass each other on the ramp?
Yeah, the ramp is wide enough, between the perpendicular cars parked on one side and then the stairwell on the other, to accommodate 2 vehicles in queue if there was a condition where there was a vehicle entering and trying to exit at the same time.
Thank you. I mean, I do think it's a good project. It was only a matter of time, like most of the people said in their comments. So, any further questions from the board? Very good. Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
I'd like to abstain from this vote, please.
Accusing yourself, okay, the record will reflect it, and I am voting with the motion. So, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Number 18, request authorization to issue a certification of approval pursuant to Article 80E-6, small project review of the zoning code for the construction of 23 residential units, including 3 IDP units, 1 commercial unit, and 23 parking spaces and 30 bicycle storage spaces located at 421-425 Market Street, and to take all related actions. John Campbell.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Monahan. The proponent, 425 Market Street LLC, proposed to construct a 5-story mixed-use building located at 421-425 Market Street in Brighton Center. The project site consists of one parcel that is approximately 7,765 square feet of land that contains currently a single-story commercial building. The proposed project contains 23 residential rental units, including 3 affordable units, 1 commercial retail space, and 23 garage spaces. In addition, the proponent has committed $30,000 in community benefits, funding transportation improvements resulting from the Alston-Brighton mobility study. The proponent filed an Article 80 application on January 27th of this year. A BPDA sponsored public meeting was held on March 10th at the Jackson Man Community Center. The comment period concluded on March 20th of 2020. The proponent, Henry Chen, and his development team were responsive to the BPDA staff throughout the review period. At this time, I would like to introduce Attorney Jeffrey Drago to further the presentation. Jeff?
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep, okay. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Director Golden, Secretary Polimis, Attorney Jeff Drago with Drago and Toscano with an address of 15 Broad Street. Today we have the pleasure of representing Henry Chen and his LLC, who's the owner and developer of 421-425 Market Street in Brighton. As John had said, as you can see, the rendering in this first picture is what the proposed building would look like. Right now, currently, it's an abandoned commercial structure, 1 story, that had been used as a bank in years past. We had a proposal before you to create residential housing, but also have a commercial component on the ground level. Next slide, please. Just as you can see, this is a proposal for 23 market rate units. There would be 3 inclusionary affordable units on site. This would have 23 garage parking spaces. We know in Brighton parking is a concern, so we got to that 1-for-1 ratio. All of parking would be off the busy Market Street. It would come in through the back on Leicester Street for a rear entrance to both a lower basement garage that would house some of the cars and then up to a ground level for the rest of the cars. This would also create 40 proposed construction jobs, 1,189 commercial space on would be retail or restaurant space on the ground level. And as John had mentioned, the community benefit of $30,000. Next slide, please. And again, this is just a description as I had already gone over. The zoning sub-district is an NS1, so it is a neighborhood shopping district, which is meeting with the community. We wanted to keep a commercial component to this project. So along with the 23 residential rental units, we would also have that commercial space that could activate that ground floor. Our lot size is 7,765 square feet, and our gross square footage is 29,147 square feet. Next slide, please. This just is our plot plan and shows you the survey and the contours of the building. Just want to point out, we also have Scott Trenier on this project, who's here as we get a little bit further to answer any questions on the design from Chu. This project would also have a roof deck to enhance open space for the residents of the building on the top floor. Next slide, please. And these are just some aerial views. So as you can see, in working with the community, we just worked with them to keep, which they wanted to see, that existing first floor structure, and we were going to be building the 4 floors above that existing building, so keeping that. And I know Councilor Braden, when she spoke, asked us to pay close attention and give homage to the other buildings. One thing that we did, if you noticed, the historic building directly across the street is all brick. We kept our building in a brick design as well to model off that, and we will continue to work on design with both the councilors' input and the community. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide, please. Oh, there we go. That's just a front view along Market Street of the existing conditions of the building. Next slide, please. And again, that's our Market Street, a view from Market in Washington. a view of the front of the building. And one thing that we did work on, we had started at 24 units, we lowered that to 23, but we also added a pullback, an additional pullback on the front of the building, as you can see, so to recess that top floor to reduce massing. Next slide, please. And that's just, again, a view on the other side of Market, looking down on the roof. You'll see the elevator shaft and some head houses to the common roof deck. Next slide. This is our ground level. So as you can see on the left-hand side of the building, or the front entrance, we've got the 1,189 square foot retail space. Then we go into our elevator area, trash, but then also all of our parking spaces, one of which is handicap accessible. And if you notice in the back, there's sort of a ramp that goes down. That's for our lower level parking as well. Next slide, please. And these are just our typical floor plans. So just to give you a breakdown, we're proposing 4 studio units, 4 one-bed units, 13 2-beds, and we also added 2 3-beds to have some family-sized units as well in the building. Next slide, please. And this just shows you sort of one of the building sections. So you can see the roof deck and head house on top, and that recessed pullback on the 5th floor. And then you can see how the lower ramp level works down to that lower basement to add that additional parking. Next slide, please. And that's just our front elevation, gives you a better idea of the brick exterior of the building that we're using, and it also shows the entrance to the building. Next slide, please. And that's our rear elevation, just looking at the back of the building, which is also would house our garage entrance for all of the parking to enter and exit the building. Next slide, please. And that's our right side elevation. Again, you can just see the brick in each level. Next slide, please. And that's our left side elevation. And I think one more slide, please. Sorry. And that's our final slide. And that concludes our presentation. We can answer any questions that the board may have.
Good, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.
I have a question before I ask the board. The brick, Jeff or Scott, is it veneer or is it a brick?
It's a full brick. You don't do veneer.
Yep, I understand. Yep, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I'm curious as to why there is such a difference between the brick color on your elevations and the brick color on the rendering. If I were a community resident and I was looking for some compatibility with the historic building across the street, and I looked only at the elevations, I would say, well, it looks as though there's an effort being made to be consistent, and also in terms of window details. But I would start with the brick coloring, and yet in the rendering, and maybe you can put the two of them up, and maybe you can even put them up next to each other. They don't appear to be at all the same. And the rendering shows something that rather stands out like a sore thumb. So I'm curious as to what the color of that final brick is going to be, and what the accommodations are that are being made from a design perspective to have the building sit more consistently with the historic building across the street.
Bob, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, as far as the brick goes, we'll obviously work with BPDA and make sure that the color is consistent with the neighborhood and the adjacent building. As far as the visuals, it's same as, I apologize, it's from one, going from one software to another, one printer to another, and there's variation. I know that the red is very bright on the elevations, but you'll see something that's going to be more consistent with what you see in the renderings and the street views that match up to the neighborhood. But we will make sure that that is consistent and works properly with the environment. The second part of the question in regard to, was it the windows? I apologize.
Well, windows and other kinds of details that would, I mean, I don't think you should mimic a building that's a century old, but I do think that particularly given that you have a councilor who's come in to comment on compatibility with the community, that there are certainly accommodations that could be made to address her concerns.
Sure, and the same as with the other project in South Boston. We did do a lot of preliminary back and forth, and the building has changed quite considerably over the time of the design up to this point. And moving forward, once we get past this point, we will be back with the BPDA and working very closely in conjunction with them to bring anything in that we possibly can to make it feel like it fits better within the neighborhood.
If I may, Dr. Landsmark, Jeff Drago again. We actually worked diligently with the community. We got the support of the BAIA. They wanted to see brick. I think this project was unique, and we had started out a while ago, over a year ago. Councilor Braden came in sort of towards the tail end of our project, and I think we also now, just knowing her concentration on detail, want to continue to work with her, and we'll likely make some changes to this exterior as we continue to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Any further questions? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I'm voting the motion as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michael.
Number 19, request authorization, excuse me, to issue a certification of approval pursuant to Article 80E-6, small project review of the zoning code for the construction of 65 residential rental units, including 10 IDP units, 1 commercial unit, and 37 parking spaces and 100 bicycle storage spaces located at 365 Weston Avenue, and to take all related actions. Michael Sinatra.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Madam Secretary and Director Golden. I am Michael Sinatra, Project Manager with BPDA Development Review. The proposal before you is located at 365 Western Avenue in Brighton. The existing site is a 15,000 square foot lot that currently contains a car wash. The current proposal before you is a small project consisting of 49,938 square feet at 6 stories and 67 feet in height. It will be comprised of 65 rental units, 10 of which will be IDP, with a mix of AMIs from 50% to 100%. The unit mix will include studios, 1 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms. There will also be 37 parking spots included in this project, as well as 100 bike parking spots. The total development cost will be approximately $18 million. The total mitigation is $65,000, $54,000 of which will be paid to BTD for enhanced bus stops, accessibility and transit improvements, and the additional $11,000 will be used to help fund the Elston-Brighton mobility study. I just want to quickly acknowledge that we did receive a letter of opposition from the Brighton-Allston Improvement Commission. It didn't come in until the board meeting began, but I just want to recognize that I did receive it and submit it to the board and submit it into the record. At this time, I would like to turn it over to the proponent to go over the presentation in more detail, after which we would be happy to take any questions you may have. I'll turn it over to Mark Lacasse, attorney for the project. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. Mark Lacasse, Lacasse Law, 75 Arlington Street in Boston, the attorney for the proponent, Boston Real Estate Capital, and its principal, Joe Hassel, who is also online here tonight. Next slide, please. So 365 Western Avenue is located near the corner of Telford Street, and there currently is a 1-story commercial building, which is a car wash. So this new proposed building will be certainly more consistent with the development that has occurred across the street and immediately adjacent behind the building on Telford Street, fronting on Soldiers Field Road. Next slide, please. On the lower portion of the screen are some of the current site context, you see there's the lovely new pocket park on the corner that was constructed by the developers of 185 Telford, which will be a nice complement to the new structure here. And the one-story car wash that exits directly onto Western Ave, which will be replaced by the proposed new building. Next slide, please. The new structure will consist of 65 residential dwelling units. 55 of those will be market rate, and 10 of the units will be subject to the inclusionary development policy with a range of AMIs from 50 to 100%, which is one of the items that the councilor earlier tonight, in expressing her support for the project, commended the developer for both exceeding the threshold of 13% and also working toward a broader range of AMI values. Create 100 construction jobs during the project, and bike storage room, and it will be an entirely smoke-free building. We're certainly finding that in marketing of residential properties that smoke-free buildings are a highly desirable feature. Next slide, please. Again, the neighborhood context, there are several large, similar sized and height buildings with as many units in the nearby vicinity that have significantly changed this area. And also, we are mindful of the Western Avenue corridor study and rezoning, which is currently underway by the BPDA. I believe they had a meeting just last night, and throughout this process have been very mindful of the principles being advanced in that planning study, and have worked with our project manager and BPDA staff to ensure that this project is consistent with the planning study as well as the other new properties in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Zoning summary, there for a project of this size and a building of this size, there are relatively few zoning issues. It is located in the Alston-Brighton Neighborhood District and the Community Commercial Subdistrict. It's subject to the Greenbelt Protection Overlay District being along Soldiers Field Road, a block away, which means there'll be specific design review requirements during our BPDA design review process. Use regulations, multifamily residential dwellings are a conditional use, so it's not a variance, only a conditional use is required. The floor area ratio exceeds the present FAR, but we expect that as part of the Western Ave rezoning that number is likely to increase to reflect conditions in the neighborhood. Building height exceeds the maximum, and the off-street parking is insufficient based on the present zoning code requirements. But again, we believe that the parking that's being provided, which is 27 regular spaces and with the option for stackers up to 37 parking spaces, is consistent with a high public transportation neighborhood. Next slide, please. Again, the public benefits are largely related to the affordable housing component and some other matters which Mike Sinatra mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Next slide, please. The usual issues that arose during the community process around construction management and infrastructure systems and community outreach. Next slide, please. Aerial view of the site location shown with the red box around it. To the right-hand side of the property is the large skating club of Boston, which I'm sure you're aware is the subject of a separate and independent proposal that is proceeding through this process. Directly across the street is a large new residential building, and diagonally across the street is the Star Market complex. Next slide, please. And again, you can see here that its proximity to Soldiers Field Road, which is why it's within the Greenbelt Protection Overlay District for design review purposes. Next slide, please. Here's a rendering of the new structure showing the existing pocket park at the corner of Western Ave and Telford Street. And you can see how this new structure is set is offset from the new building at 185 Telford Street. And we worked closely with that building, which is a condominium building, on some of the items in the rear of the building where the two properties connect and intersect to make sure that the on-the-ground experience behind the buildings would be pleasant as well. Next slide, please. So here's a landscape site plan which shows the Telford Street building on the right-hand side of the screen and the proposed new structure on the left-hand side of the screen, with the park on the corner and some of the finer design items related to the connection point between the two buildings in the rear. And we have the support of the 185 Telford Street residents in regard to that. Next slide, please. Just an aerial massing view of the proposed structure and the 185 Telford Street building, which fronts on Soldiers Field Road. And you can see there's that space in the rear of both of the buildings to keep them separate. And next slide. Next couple of slides are just elevations showing the height of the building and sample floor plans. Next slide. Next, please. Sample floor plan showing the garage plate with the parking spaces and the ability to have stackers, and the double loaded corridor with a range of units on each of the floors, and a common roof deck at the top of the building for the residents of the building to have some usable outdoor space. Next slide, please. And the slide on the right shows the common roof deck. And next slide. I believe that's it. Thank you kindly. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions from the board?
I'm not sure I understand why you would ask us to approve a project based on the developer's expectation that zoning will change.
It's not so much the developer's expectation that zoning will change. It's just that there is a pending planning study, and many of these planning studies span 2 or more years. And it is frequently the case that projects come into the BPDA Article 80 pipeline during the pendency of a planning study. And in those cases, developers are encouraged to hew their proposals consistent with the planning study's goals and perspectives. That's what I was getting at. And I've had experience in the past, for example, with the Harrison Albany corridor study in the South End, where numerous projects were being advanced prior to the completion of the planning study, but done consistent with what the BPDA staff knew and told us about those planning studies while they were in process. So it's not so much an expectation as it is a desire to be consistent with what we know the planning study to contain, and certainly not inconsistent with the zoning relief that's been granted to very similar buildings nearby.
So a little bit ahead of the curve.
I like to think of it as parallel. We're sort of ahead of the curve, but also moving in parallel with a planning study that is ongoing. I think the same thing is happening in, for example, South Boston. The plan for Dot Ave is completed, but none of those planning study principles have been incorporated into Article 68, yet developers are certainly hewing their proposals to be consistent with the guidelines set forth in the planning study.
Okay.
Any further questions? Hearing none, it's the pleasure of the board.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I'm voting with the motion as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you kindly, and thank you for your time.
Number 20, request authorization to issue a scoping determination waiving further review pursuant to Article 80 large project review of the zoning code for the construction of 166 units, including 28 IDP units and 10 compact living units, 2,400 square feet of ground floor retail space, and 80 parking spaces located at 449 Cambridge Street, and to take all related actions, Michael Sinatra.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Madam Secretary, and Director Golden. Thank you. I am Michael Sinatra, Project Manager with the BPDA Development Review. The project before you is the 449 Cambridge Street project in Alston. It is a large project comprised of approximately 164,000 gross square feet. The current site is made up of 2 parcels which are home to an auto repair service and a tow lot, totaling 32,830 gross square feet. The proposal is to construct 2 residential buildings consisting of 166 rental units as well as 2,400 square feet of ground floor commercial space, some of which will be dedicated to an artist gallery or cafe. Many of the units will fall under the city's compact unit policy. Building 1 will contain a 7-story building with 127 units and approximately 80 parking spaces with amenity space, outdoor space, and a roof deck. The gross square feet for Building 1 will be approximately 131,000 square feet. Building 2 will contain a 6-story building with 39 units with approximately 39,000 square feet. Approximately 11,000 square feet of amenity space will be shared between both buildings in compliance with the compact unit policy. A robust community process was held in which some of the requests were more affordability and artist-led workspace units. As a result, the proponent has agreed to designate 17% of the units as IDP affordable, which results in 28 units with a mix of AMIs from 60% to 110%, 7 of which will consist of a mix of 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. The proponent has also committed to designating 1/3 of the units as artist-led workspace units. I also want to acknowledge that we did receive an opposition letter from the BAIA, the Brighton Alston Improvement Association, for this project as well. It did come in at the start of the meeting, so I just wanted to address that. I did submit it for the record. And I will now turn it over to Dave Warmester and Robert Brown from the development team to go over their presentation in more detail, after which we would be happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Director Golden, Secretary Polimas. My name is Dave Warmester, and I'm with Anchorline Partners. We are the proponent of the 449 Cambridge project. Let me start my video here. Sorry. Did I lose you?
Nope, you're there.
Okay, I'm trying to start my camera. With me today is Robert Brown, a principal of Perkins & Will Architects here in Boston. Before we get started and I turn over the presentation to Robert to walk you through the project, I would like to say a very special thank you to both the elected officials and several members of the BPDA staff who were instrumental in helping us navigate the process over the past few months. I would like to thank Councilor Burden, Councilor Flaherty, Director Golden, Jonathan Greeley, Michael Christopher, Alexa Pinard, and I'd like to put out a special thank you to our project manager, Michael Sinatra, for helping us through what has been a lot of new virtual experiences, including virtual public meetings, virtual IAG meetings, and a whole host of different types of public process that has taken place online. So as we all know, it's been a very different process over the last several months, and without their help and guidance and assistance, we wouldn't be here before you today. We are very excited about this opportunity for development of new housing in Alston. We firmly believe that this site is an excellent opportunity to create new housing in that its current state is an auto body repair shop or a former auto body repair shop and a tow yard. We are not displacing any existing residents or removing any important neighborhood assets. Clearly, the existing building has outlived its useful life and has become somewhat of an eyesore along Cambridge Street. So we think the site itself is a tremendous opportunity for redevelopment. In addition to the host of public benefits that Mike Sinatra has outlined for you in his board memo, we as a development team have probably worked the hardest on our enhanced IDP program, where by working with our IAG, with elected officials, including and especially Councilor Burden and the neighborhood, we have been able to increase our IDP commitment from the required 13% to 17%, which represents the creation of 28 on-site IDP units. We have also, through the community process, worked to increase the size of the IDP units to include a selection of larger, more family-friendly units. Some of those with lower AMIs below the 70% threshold. So we've worked very hard on this component of the project. Another item of the, that we're happy to present tonight that you'll see in Robert's presentation is that we have designed and committed to the engagement of the local arts community to really create a vibrant public realm with the introduction of several large building murals that will be commissioned and completed exclusively by local Allston artists. On top of that, we have also agreed to set aside 30% of the aforementioned IDP units as artist housing. So that represents 8 units set aside specifically for artist housing requirements. Finally, I'd like to make note of what I think the benefit that we as a development team are probably the most proudest of. It's being able to offer our commitment to work with the Allston Brighton Community Development Corporation. I got to know John Woods, who runs the ABCDC during the initial community outreach process. And the ABCDC owns and operates a project called Hano Homes. Hano Homes is a 20-unit row house development that is just down the street from our project. These 20 units are deeply affordable, but also in desperate need of capital upgrades to building envelopes, mechanical systems, life safety systems, and the creation of better accessibility. So it's been well over 15 years since ABCDC has been able to do any major commercial upgrades to this project. We have committed through this project $1 million towards those capital upgrades. And this will not only allow those deeply affordable units to remain viable, it'll also allow John and his team at the Allston Brighton Community Development Corporation to create even more affordable housing opportunities within the Allston Brighton neighborhoods. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robert Brown, and he will walk you through the project, and then we're happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Well, Dave, thank you. And Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, we're really pleased to participate in this very interesting project. And as Dave has described, it's really a wonderful purpose-built project that has the ability to re-knit this neighborhood where there are 2 industrial sites that were sitting there before. And we'll go through the presentation. You'll see that we've been able to improve roadway of Emery Street, Rugg Road itself, and tie into a project that's sitting behind us. So the urban realm is really going forward. Next slide, please. I think this just describes the important components of the IDP units that Dave has gone over, a number of construction jobs, and then the ability for us to, not only are we providing parking, but bike and bike storage on site, and we are looking at LEED certification. Next slide, please. Wow, that one's a difficult one to see. I think we'll go to the next one. This gives you a little bit of context. With the building with the red awnings is the existing building. Right to the right of it is another existing building, which we're not going to be able to take down, but you'll see that the context is really 3-story, 4-story brick traditional home context. Next, please. Now we're looking in the opposite direction on Cambridge, looking towards the west. You see the auto repair building, which will remain, that is not a part of our parcel, and then the red awning building will be removed. Next. And then the interesting part of the site is that it transitions from Cambridge Street, which would be on the upper side of this photograph, down to what is Emery Street on the left and Rugg Road on the right. So we have the ability to slide a couple levels of parking in here and take advantage of this without having internal ramps and an awful lot of extra square footage. But you can see it's a site that really could utilize some tremendous care and improvement. Next slide, please. And then just looking down Emery Street, and what we want to identify is that Emery Street is a private street. And as you can see, Emery Street doesn't have sidewalks. It's used as a parking lot in a variety of ways. And so our project does sit in two parcels, one to the right of Emery Road that's shown there, and one to the left. And we think between those two and our ability to, on our side of the properties, really connect into the sidewalk system that is we've worked hard with the BPDA to describe will really help this neighborhood and be an exemplar project going forward. Next, please. So this shows the site plan. At the lower portion of the screen is Cambridge Street. On the left-hand side is Emery Road. And so we're working with the BPDA and Boston Transportation to define a bus lane, a bike lane, bike parking, for blue bikes that are sitting there, proper handicap accessible curb cuts on our side, and a fairly robust landscaping scheme. Right now, if you go down there, not a tree exists in this entire space. Where Emery Road takes a turn to the right, the project that's up at the upper portion is called 40 Rug, and they are preceding us, and they set the direction. We have picked that up. And as I indicated, this project is really made of two buildings, one which is 449 Cambridge, which sits on Cambridge and wraps around to the right on Emery, and then a small building called Emery Road that's on the left side. And there's a crosswalk there, and that crosswalk gives access to the Emery Road tenants to the parking and other amenities in the 449 Cambridge building. Next, please. And this shows sort of the essence of the site is that we got 80 parking spaces in, but BPDA was very interested in making sure that this was just not a visible garage, and we agreed with them. We worked on the number of curb cuts that were lessened, and so at the upper portion of the site, just to the left of the light blue units, is entry and access. It's a single roadway coming in, so we don't have a big wide curb cut. We have bike storage near the central core of the Cambridge Street building. And then, as Dave was mentioning, have a very vigorous conversation with local artists. And so there is a gallery position that's sitting on Emery Road that you'll see in the elevations that both disguise the garage as well as provide a wonderful opportunity for artists to display their work in a rotating way. Now, the other part that I think was really interesting is, and another idea that came from BPDA was, can we get units that are on the street? And so on the very tip between Emery and Rugg, we've got townhouse units. They really add a whole variety to the entire complex. And I think it has certainly given a scale and character to what was, if you remember that photograph, that was really chain link fence and razor wire at the top, is a very different feel that we'll have going forward. Next, please. And so this shows the first floor. They mentioned that there is retail on the ground floor. So we have retail. It's that yellow block. Right adjacent to it is the lobby, which is rather small, but open to both sides, and hopeful of having all sorts of interesting programs going forward to that. The Emery building to the left is showing sort of their first floor of units, and we have both studios, 1s and 2s, and a couple 3s as requested by the BPDA. Next, please. Wow. Well, this should be showing a rendering of our project. Let's try another one. There we go. So this is looking towards the west. There's the existing auto repair building. You can see the mural that Dave was talking about. It's a end wall that we cannot put windows in, so we feel very that this is a great opportunity to help tie it into a special part of this neighborhood. It's a 6-story building, but we are using major mass identifications, as you can see with this cutout where the yellow is on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side, as a way to sort of connect into this datum of the triple deckers that exist along that space. And then as the building goes back to the right-hand side of this image behind the auto service building, really has a simple curve both on the inside face and on the outside face that overlooks some of the outside amenity that you can see is just above the people on the right-hand side, which is at that second level, which is for the tenants of the building. Next, please. Okay, this is looking down Emory Street, so we're right across the street from the Emory Street building. On the right-hand side would be Cambridge, and you can see on that first floor the vitrines that are showing the artwork that is there. The dead center is our is access to the loading dock, and just to the left of that is the small entry for autos, and then the two-story sort of brown-colored elements are the townhouses. And so there, I think we've got 6 townhouses that are running it along and giving a real interesting character to that base. The upper portion of the building, again, is sort of tying into the triple decker height and utilizing these sort of larger opening cutouts in a very sculptural way. So we're seeing the building as a piece of art in and of itself. Not to say that we're artists, but as architects, I think we're trying to do everything we can to give it an ephemeral quality. And we're also breaking down the overall mass at the very top by cutting back and setting back some of the units so that there's not just a singular mass that's really read through. Next, please. This is on the opposite side, so now we're on Rugg Road. On the left-hand side would be Cambridge. The gray building with the stripe is the auto repair location. The art vitrines are continuing on this side. To the right of those at the first and second floor are the additional townhouses that are sitting there. And we, as you can see, we've got almost an entire story of grade that's going from front to back. And then up above is the brown fence that you can see is a really decorative artistic fence. You can't see it in this illustration, but that is for the amenities, the exterior amenities that we have that also tie into the interior amenities at that second level. And then, as I was mentioning, there's that curvaceous turn of the building. And on the right-hand side, it looks like the windows are kind of jumping forward. We are sort of staggering those so that there's just not this very simple, straightforward rhythm. So in every case, trying to make something unique and special. Next, please. We think these sections may be helpful for you to understand. On the top one, it's cutting across the site, so it's as if we took the facades off of Cambridge Street. On the right-hand side is the 449 building, and it shows the 2 levels of parking. The one which is the upper level ties into Cambridge Street, and the lower level ties into Emory. And then the space, which is Emory Road between the 449 and the Emory building, we have a small amenity package there, and then mostly 1s and 2 bedrooms that are stacking. And then the building beyond in gray is the existing building 40 Rugg. The other one is cutting through the lobby, so you can see that we have a small 2-story lobby space and the 2 levels of parking and the loading on the very far right side. Next, please. These are very straightforward flat elevations. The upper one is on Cambridge Street. The lower one is on Emory Road. Those are the ones with the vitrines of artwork. Next, please. And then again, the flat elevations of on Emory Road, where the white building is the auto repair, the curvaceous upper portion, and then the lower level, lower shot is showing Emory. So we've chosen a different color, in this case more of a Tuscan red, but still have that same feeling that we're want to define a triple decker height and then the full 6 stories that are the building. Next, please. And I think that's it. We're certainly open for questions.
So members of the board, if I could just make one comment. The initial first slide indicated that there was a former, we had used the name The Vinyl initially, and through our public process, I just wanted to make this clear. Through the public process in having meetings with the neighbors, the name was not well received, so we have agreed to drop that name. It's unfortunate that we just didn't pick it up in the first slide, but I wanted to make you aware of that. My apologies.
Good. Thank you, team. Any questions from the board?
I have just two quick comments. One is my thanks and congratulations to the developer. Your recognition that there has been a decades-long, as far as I can remember, presence of artists on Rug Road is well reflected in the project that you've put together here, and your work with the artists, I think, is to be commended. And then to Robert Brown and the architectural team, you've taken some fairly small design details like a curved wall or the addition of color or a cutout on the upper floors of the building to create something that really at this stage looks quite distinguished and is something that artists in this country don't usually see when artist housing is built. And I like seeing a project done where artists who too often are used to being relegated to the sidelines in terms of what's designed for them and for their neighbors are being appreciated for the value that they bring aesthetically and economically to a community. So I would just say that this is a project that I hope serves as something of a model for other developers and architects who are working in the city at this point.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dr.
Ted.
Any further questions from the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call. Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I also voting with the motion. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members of the board, I appreciate it.
21, request authorization to approve the Brigham and Women's Hospital Institutional Master Plan renewal for an additional 2 years pursuant to section 80D-5.2, subsection E, section 80D-6, and section 80D-8 of the zoning code to waive the scoping determination and to take all related actions. Mr. Carmody.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you to the members of the board. The proposal before you is the Brigham and Women's Hospital Institutional Master Plan, seeking a 2-year renewal and a waiver of further review of unchanged plans. To be clear, the proposal does not include any new development projects, but it simply seeks a 2-year renewal of the existing IMP, which was approved in 2010 and amended in 2012 and 2014. BPDA staff feel this is an appropriate renewal, especially in light of the pandemic, as it gives the hospital the necessary time to accurately assess its own campus needs and to then engage in a thoughtful 10-year review process 2 years from now. This renewal thus serves as an update to the hospital's activities in Boston and keeps the hospital in compliance with maintaining an active IMP. The hospital's community task force was notified of the renewal request and no public comments were received. At this time, I'll turn it over to Doug Carney, Senior Vice President of Real Estate at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and he'll go through the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carmody. Good evening, Chairperson Monahan, Vice Chairperson Monahan, members of the board, Director Golden, and Secretary Paul Amos. As mentioned, I'm Doug Carney. Excuse me. Long day. I'll come back. I'm Doug Carney, and you'll have to put up with my funny voice for a moment. It'll come back. I'm the Senior Vice President for Real Estate Facilities Operations at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and I really appreciate the opportunity to make this request for an amendment and renewal of our institutional master plan, as has been mentioned, unchanged for an additional 2 years. Again, as was mentioned, the IMP was first approved in 2010 for a term of 10 years, or pardon me, 10 years, amended twice in 2014 and 2012. And I am requesting that the IMP is approved for an additional 2 years until August 2022. Some helpful context on the hospital's operations over the past year here. We've helped 50,000 inpatients as well as 1.5 million outpatients. We've been successful in obtaining over $700 million in extramural research funding, which has funded groundbreaking research to advance the treatment and care of our patients through innovation and discovery here in Boston and the community. And we employ over 18,000 people, approximately 30% of which are city residents. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. As you know, we've been in the forefront of providing essential care during the COVID-19 pandemic, which continues. May I have the next slide? I thought it would be helpful to provide an overview of the projects we've undertaken and completed in accordance with the hospital's existing IMP, specifically the Hale Building for Transformative Medicine, the Massachusetts Mental Health Center offices, several campus additions and upgrades, including an expansion of our neonatal intensive care unit, as well as one of my favorite places on campus, the Stoneman Centennial Park, which is a really, I think, terrific public space. If I could have the next slide, please. This three-dimensional drawing shows you where these are located. And may I have the next slide? And these are photographs of the actual buildings. Hale Building, which is our newest building, one I think is a really terrific addition to the community and an attractive building. Mass Mental Health, and then our NICU expansion as well. May I have the next slide? And then Stoneman Centennial Park, which you may have noticed if you've been here recently. We've added additional tables from Masco and really made it an active public space. And it's also served for some community functions, which you see in the lower right-hand corner. Next slide, please. During the current IMP process, the hospital has also partnered with key community and public entities to deliver some exceptional and innovative developments, including the ones you see here. The mosaic on the Riverway in association with the Roxbury tenants of Harvard, the DMH, Fenwood Inn and Partial Hospital, the construction and delivery of which creates an asset for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and clients in the Department of Mental Health, and then the Roxbury tenants of Harvard Community Center. Next slide, please. And these are photographs of these very significant projects in the Longwood Medical area that we've been a partner with too. Next slide. The hospital's current IMP also authorized the development of 360,000 square feet of research and laboratory building on a ground lease parcel from Emmanuel College's campus. This parcel will commence when we have the capital funding available to do it, and we've not begun the final design of it. If I could have the next slide. As far as it's gone is just the approval process and the massing, and you can see that on the left side of the screen, and then some very, very early diagrams for how the building might be stacked. The next slide, please. In addition to these significant bricks and mortar community benefits, the hospitals also provided other community benefits in the form of direct payments to the city for $2.4 million supporting housing and job creation, as well as payments in lieu of taxes totaling $6.2 million over the last fiscal year alone, $3 million in cash, $3.2 million in direct community benefit. And we've also provided something that I'm particularly proud of, and those are the essential healthcare services in communities that we serve, including the community health centers in South Jamaica Plain, as well as our Brookside Community Health Center. If I could have the next slide. I'm sure you're aware of our efforts during the COVID-19 process, but as you can appreciate, the hospital dedicated enormous resources towards testing, patient care, research, and aid in the prevention and cure of those in the city and beyond who might be affected by the COVID-19 virus. And we didn't stop there. We went beyond that, including a focus on addressing food insecurity and mobile testing sites brought to the neighborhoods so that we could give access to care to people who might not otherwise be able to get to care. Could I have the next slide? In this effort, the hospital's obviously dedicated resources to serve those in greater potential of contracting the disease and giving the underlying conditions of health inequities and disparities. Next slide. And going forward, in closing, I'd just like to talk about what the future holds for the hospital. We're studying our aging infrastructure. Our primary bed tower is a 1980s vintage building. If any of you have been here, you know that we have some patient rooms that are semi-privates. We're going to develop a plan to convert all of our patient rooms to single occupancy patient rooms, both to meet the clinical and patient expectations that are a real trend in the industry. And then we're going to evaluate the overall campus needs and planning for the upgrades that are required through our infrastructure. So with that, we're requesting a 2-year extension of the IMP with no changes in the plan. It's a renewal. And if I could have the final slide, I'd just like to thank you for your time and attention. And I deeply appreciate the opportunity to be here and make this request of you. And I'm prepared to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. County. Are there any questions from the board?
Just a comment that you folks have been doing such extraordinary work during this COVID crisis, but even before. I think we're all very grateful for the work that you're doing.
Thank you for that. We really appreciate that recognition.
Any further questions from the board? Hearing none, was the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I also voting with the motion. Congratulations. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. We thank the board and the staff.
Number 22, request authorization to issue a scope and determination waiving further review pursuant to section 80B-5.3D of the zoning code for the redevelopment of the William Barton Rogers Middle School to 75 senior housing rental units, including 50 deed restricted units, an auditorium, cinema space, and a central courtyard located at 15 Everett Street, and to take all related actions. Dana Whiteside.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board, Director Golden, and Secretary Polhemus. For the record, my name is Dana Whiteside, Deputy Director for Community Economic Development with the agency. My apologies for the clock that is going off. I'm going to mute myself momentarily. Thank you for your indulgence. My apologies for that disruption. Next slide, please. Actually, I'm going to say a few brief words about this project. It is, as indicated, an adaptive reuse of the former William Barton Rogers School in Hyde Park and Cleary Square. This project, the building, I should say, was placed under city surplus, a process that was undertaken by our sister agency, the Department of Neighborhood Development, issued a request for proposals, which was responded to by the Penrose LLC in conjunction with LGBTQ Housing, Inc. And this team will share more about the actual program itself, and for the details you can see from the slide that's in front of you now, one of the major components of this project. And I would point out that one of the primary aspects of its viability and what has made it seem such a worthwhile project is the fact that it will be creating affordable units, 50 of which will be geared toward individuals who are between the 30 to 60% area median income, and the remaining 25 units will be with a goal toward individuals between the 80% and 100% area median income. So this creation of much needed affordable housing in the district is a great value and deemed very useful. A few notes really quick about process. As mentioned earlier, the Department of Neighborhood Development granted designation to Penrose LLC for the development of this property in November of 2019. We, the BPDA, received an initial project notification in November as well, the 25th of November 2019. We worked with the development team over the next several months to supplement the information that was provided by them, and during the intervening weeks and months, looked at issues related to site plan. This is a very challenging site, building design, adaptive reuse, and given the constituency that is being served, senior housing, making sure that we interacted with our Age Strong department as well as the Commission on Disabilities to manage some of the issues that you'll see further along in the presentation. We received response to a request for supplemental information on June 16th and also had a follow-up community meeting on August 4th. I will stop my remarks there, and I'd like to introduce Charlie Adams, Senior Vice President from Penrose LLC, who will further the presentation with his team, and we are available for questions afterwards.
Thank you, Dana.
Great, thank you. Can people hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Oh, great, thank you. Thank you very much, Dana. And thank you very much, Vice Chairman Monahan, members of the board, Director Golden, and Secretary Polimas. We really appreciate the opportunity to. Am I echoing?
No, I think that's Philippe. Philippe, if you could mute you, so there you go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Perfect. Oh, great. So thank you. So, and with me today is Carmen Chung, who's also at Penrose with me. We're going to have some folks from our architectural team, landscape architect. We also have our attorney at the end for questions, John Polgini, and our historian that's helping us with this from PAL as well. But also on behalf of our partner, the LGBT Senior Housing Inc., we wanted to thank you for this opportunity to present this deal that we're very excited about. It's been a work that's been generated a lot of interest. We're very excited about the fact that the city of Boston has entrusted us with the opportunity to redevelop this really important asset for the Hyde Park community, and the support that the Hyde Park community has provided us as well in being able to turn this resource back into a housing opportunity for the folks of Boston. Next slide, please. Great. So we're really excited about Hyde Park because of all the sort of the cultural amenities, the great retail that's there, great entertainment that's all down the main street. We're very excited about the aspects of Hyde Park has to offer this development. Next slide. Even more importantly, and particularly with what we're trying to accomplish here, is the fact that Hyde Park really is a community of many firsts, and has been at the forefront of some of our incredible achievements in history of this country. With the Grimke Sisters, with the 54th Regiment, there's a lot of unique history about this area, which we are very excited about and trying to celebrate within this building. Next slide. So a little bit about what our mission is with the school. And our goal here is to create a vibrant, inclusive, and welcoming mixed-income senior housing community that celebrates the historic elements of the building and incorporates meaningful public space for the residents of Hyde Park, the city of Boston, including LGBT elders. This project will be the first LGBTQ-friendly development in Boston and all of New England, and we're very excited about bringing that to the city. Next slide, please. So our goals are obviously to celebrate the history of the William Barton Rogers School. Everything we did was with an eye towards the historic nature of the building and trying to preserve as much of the historic character as we could. We're trying to repurpose this public asset. We've created about 10,000 square feet of public space. space we otherwise could have converted into units. We thought it was important to dedicate back to the community, and most importantly, to create a welcoming and affirming mixed income community, including the LGBTQ elder community. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the progress. Since we were designated in November, we've done a lot of work. This is a very challenging building. Anytime you do a historic building, you have to work within what you have, and you have to work within how you get from the building to the site. So a lot of challenges to combine the historical elements of the building with accessibility. And I'm very excited and proud of my team and the hard work that they've done to do that. And you're going to hear from them shortly. But here's a little list of the things that we've had to accomplish over the last, since we were picked in November to try to move this project along. And we've done a lot of incredible hard work, as you can see from this list, of trying to understand the building, understand how it works, and then design the building accordingly. Next slide. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to turn it over to Philippe Saad, who's the architect who's responsible for putting this plan together, and who's also going to work with Jess Hamilton, who will talk about the landscape design features of it as well. Philippe?
Good afternoon, everybody. Just making sure there's no echo and everybody can hear me.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an echo, but go ahead. Let's see if it fixes itself.
Okay. A little bit about the neighborhood. On the slide on the left-hand side, that is the site of the school as it sits very close to Cleary Square and River Street in Hyde Park, and they're in close proximity to two main T stations, the Fairmount line and the Hyde Park line. Images on the right are at the Menino Center and the square in Cleary Square. Next, please. That's the building as it stands today and a few years ago when it was decommissioned as a school. The building is in three parts. There are wing 1 and 2 and 3 that have been built at different parts. One in 1902, in the 20s and 1933. And each one has slightly different characters, but all three wings are in this buff brick color. Next, please. The inside of the building is very typical of a grand school in the city of Boston. Many large spaces, very wide corridor, a gymnasium, 2 grand staircases, an auditorium, and a small tiered classroom on the top floor, and a profusion of multiple classrooms of different sizes. Next, please. So when we take an asset like this that was designed to be a school that sits high top on a hillside or on a mound because it needed to be prominent and show a presence in the neighborhood, how do we take this asset and transform it into a senior housing? Accessibility is a major challenge that we have resolved. So, and also organization and orientation were important aspects of our design. So, the entrances to the building and their arrival to the site has been developed along Harvard Avenue, where we have now 3 access points. The one on the bottom left is the residential entrance. The one in the middle will be the service entrance, and the one at the top of the page will be the community entrance, where people who do not live in the building could access the community spaces. Next, please. So because it sits on a mound, the courtyard is 1 level higher than the street, so it's fairly disconnected. So we were trying to create a animated front also along the courtyard side by adding a sunroom and opening up some windows. Next, please. That's the only element that is being added to the building architecturally from the exterior is a sunroom that overlooks the courtyard and does not show at all from the street. Next, please. A section through the building talking about the grades. Next, please. And then by locating the 3 entrances along Harvard Avenue, it has helped animate even further Harvard Ave and made our building a continuation of the Hyde Park Library along Harvard Avenue. Next, please. Jess?
Sorry. Thank you, Philippe. I'm Jess Hamilton with McYoung Kim Design, the landscape architects. So I'll just take you through the landscape plan briefly. Starting on the left side, we have our community entrance. You can see that sort of meandering path there for all of our entrances. from Harvard Ave. We've managed to grade it such that we only have sloped walkways. We don't rely on ramps anywhere to get people up from the street level to those entrances. And we're planting around each of the community and residential entrances with kind of a celebratory garden palette. You can also see some visitor bike parking there all the way to the left at the corner of Harvard Ave and Webster Street, servicing kind of the community members that will be coming and participating in the various events and utilizing the services. Moving down the street to that middle entrance, that's our sort of back of house service entrance. Again, serviced by a sloped walk that wraps around, that'll be really used by the facilities people for waste, etc. And then moving now to the kind of sloped walk furthest to the right, that is our residence entrance. And so you can see there that we have a sloped walk kind of veering off to the right and a stair directly moving up to the entrance. And at the top of that, we kind of have a front porch opened to the community, or that allows kind of residents to interface with the community more, enjoy the afternoon sun that's west facing, and really kind of brings people in through the neighborhood. Into moving up on the plan, we've got the handicap accessible parking spaces and a drop-off area. So the drop-off, anticipating we may have some vans, Ubers, Lyfts for residents to come in through and have that access to that door that's elevated significantly above the grade. So by having the drop-off and parking there, we are kind of allowing for easy access to that door without having to navigate the grade change from the street level to our ground floor level. This area, we are adding a retaining wall to kind of hold that parking there, but we're maintaining over 50% of the green space and kind of that historic view of the front of the building that really is, or historic front of the building, sitting on Everett Street, which will no longer be our entrance. And then to get back to our community courtyard, we have kind of coming from where that resident entrance is. And if you follow that white path up along the right side of the building, and then up through those stripes, that will be a shared driveway, pedestrian walking, again, sloped walk. And then you come to the only ramp on the site, and that ramp will bring you up to another sloped walk that brings you now to the first floor where our courtyard is located. So that was really designed with the spirit of the school in mind. We're thinking of places where people can gather, recreate, and learn from each other. The brown in the middle, we've got a deck and pergola space for cooking, gathering, small classes to work together. There's a walking track around the perimeter, that blue-green track. So, and that together with some kind of outdoor fitness equipment on the right provides residents, an opportunity to stretch their muscles, different varying levels of activity from the passive to more active. And then the green boxes that above that kind of fitness center area to the left of the courtyard, we've got garden beds built in for the residents to kind of take as their own and have their own garden space. Before moving on, I'll just mention back for the community entrance to the left of the plan. I forgot to mention, we have that meandering sloped path there, but we're also resetting the existing historic stairs for kind of the first set of those to really their first landing. And we'll be using those historic stairs reset to be compliant, adding handrails, and then the stairs behind that lower staircase will no longer be used. Our new entrance will be just to the right of that old historic staircase. Next slide, please. And this materiality just gives you a little bit of a feel for how we envision our interventions interfacing with this historic property. On the perimeter, we're really trying to have a light touch, keeping kind of this idea of a kind of school on a green hill, low green ground cover planting, putting in as many trees as we can, given the kind of subsurface conditions with the bedrock. And really where we are having to slice into that grade, we are using more modern materials, Corten sheet, to keep that intervention minimal and understated. So we're still really celebrating that historic building. And then in the courtyard and throughout, we've really focused on choosing furnishings that are suitable for this population. So sturdy seats with kind of a variety, but with backs, arms, things that people can comfortably get in and out of, kind of with varying levels of stability. And those garden bed planters that I mentioned will be raised, so table height, so people don't have to be hunched down, or people that are using assistive devices will be able to get in there without a problem. And I think that's it for me. Next slide. Oh, no, sorry, one more. Parking was something that the community had brought up, and we are, as you can see, only providing 5 spaces on site in that area off of Everett Street, but we worked with the city to open up 25 additional spaces on street that were not available previously. And that's the end. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you, Jess. I'll take on from here and I'll take you through the building. And again, we'll start with the left-hand side, which is the community entrance, the public lobby, a gallery, an art room, and a classroom. And then on the right-hand side, there's a space that we are dedicating for the 54th Regiment, a local community organization that needs additional space for office and storage and exhibit. If you continue past the gallery, there is a new elevator that will be put into the double height gymnasium, so people could get down into that lowest level of the building, the gymnasium. If we can go to the next slide, please. The gymnasium is one of the largest spaces and will be used as a multifunctional space for residents as well as for visitors and community members. There'll be toilets and kitchens and all the needed stuff around it. Could we go back to the previous slide? No, thank you very much. The right-hand side of the building is the side of the building that is only for resident use. And if we take the entrance, which is between the resident lobby and the management suite, it takes us into the oldest wings of the building and into the elevators that are put into the courtyard right at the elbows of both sides of the courtyards. So these elevators will go all the way down into the ground floor to take people upstairs to the upper levels. 2 elevators because it's a senior building. One breaks down, the other one could be maintained. Everything that's yellow, everything that is orange is amenity spaces for residents. Everything that is blue is residential units on this specific floor. Next, please. Thank you. This is the first floor. This is the main floor of the school, which is 1 level higher than the street, and it coincides with the courtyard level. So this is where we have located our only element that is added onto that building, being the sunroom. The sunroom is tilted slightly towards the east and the south to capture the sun rays, and it's basically a multi-purpose space for the residents, opening up onto the courtyard with modern material, glass, and metal panels. The rest of the units are located within classrooms for the most part and are a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms, in majority 1 bedrooms. Next, please. The upper level, the second level of the school is in majority units as well. We have, to the exception of 1 large auditorium, that is also a 1.5 height space that would accommodate up to 100+ people and has a stage and will be maintained for resident use and occasionally for visitors use as long as something is scheduled in advance. Next, please. And that's the top floor of the building. Again, majority units, to the exception of the tiered classroom in orange at the top right of the plan as well. Next, please. This is a count of the amount of units divided by types and size, totaling a total of 75 units. Next, please. A few renderings of the school. There's not much that has been done to the exterior. Windows will be replaced with historically significant windows, as well as all the brick will be repaired. The 1933 entrance, that's the community entrance, also will be renovated but however will not be used. The new entrance is built right next to it, right on this first landing above the stairs. That is the intersection between the stairs and the sloped walkway that Jess had mentioned, adding a new canopy right over that new entrance. Next, please. This is a view of the corner between Everett and Harvard Street, looking at the residential entrance. Again, a very skinny steel canopy with for cover will be added into the building to signify the entrance, but also at the same time to provide cover for people who are being dropped off by car on the property before they enter into the building. Next, please. This is a landscaped courtyard showing the elevators on the right and on the left, as well as the sunroom towards the back. And the landscape features trees and plantings and colors and walking tracks that had been mentioned by Jess previously. Next, please. I think that this is the end of the design presentation, putting back the slides about the community benefits.
Thanks very much, Penrose LLC team. Members of the board, that ends the presentation and we're happy to take any questions.
Great, next project. Are there any questions from the board? No, great.
I just want to make one comment, which is I live directly across from the old Rossendale High School, which was turned into senior housing. I don't know when, but it really adds a great vibrancy and element to our neighborhood that is just really special. And this is a fantastic project, and I'm very happy to support it.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I also vote in favor of the motion. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Number 23.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Request authorization to issue a certificate of completion to the Woodbury Kennard Associates for the successful completion of the 187 Sumner Street project located in the East Boston neighborhood in accordance with the land disposition agreement. Michael Sinatra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Madam Secretary and Director Golden. I'm Michael Sinatra, again, Project Manager with BPDA Development Review. We are here before you this evening seeking a certificate of completion for the building located at 187 Sumner Street in East Boston. This site was approved for rehabilitation and new construction by this body at the January 2019 board meeting. They are in the process of beginning the rehab and construction on the new project, but after reviewing their paperwork, realized that they never received a certificate of completion when the original project was completed. The previous project entered into a land disposition agreement with the BRA and had their land disposition agreement executed on March 3rd, 1978. The LDA created a 121A on the site that expired in October of 2018, which in turn led to the most recent proposal that will begin renovation of the existing building and building it in construction of a new low-income elderly housing. This certificate is necessary for title clearing purposes and so that the proponent can execute all of its documents so that the new project can begin. Thus, we are here before you this evening to ask for your vote to approve and issue this outstanding certificate. We do also have some members of the development team present, so we would be happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller? Muted.
Aye.
Aye. And I also vote in favor of the motion. Congratulations.
Thank you.
24, request authorization to issue final certificates of completion to the E+ Solutions LLC for the successful completion of the 156-160 Highland Street project located in the Roxbury neighborhood in accordance with the land disposition agreement. John Delzell.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board. We're here tonight to seek your approval for the certificate of completion for the third E+ Green Building project. This is a 4-unit development that has achieved LEED Platinum certification and energy positive performance. The 4 units include 1 affordable unit at 80% AMI. and the project has met all the requirements of the LDA. The certificate of completion is necessary for the sale of a unit.
Straightforward. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I also vote in favor of the motion. Congratulations, John.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board. Have a good evening.
Thanks. 25, request authorization to submit an application to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, MassWorks. Hey, John, if you can still hear me, mute you. There you go. Let's start again. 25, request authorization to submit an application to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, MassWorks Infrastructure Program for development projects located at 125 Amory Street in Jamaica Plain, 135 Dudley Street, and Whittier Choice Phase 3 in Roxbury, and to enter into grant agreements for said projects. Dana?
Thank you again, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board, Secretary Polhemus, and Director Golden. The MassWorks Infrastructure Program is a resource that the BPDA has utilized in conjunction with development partners that we've worked with on several projects over the last several fiscal years to promote the creation primarily of significant affordable housing and also job creation. In the last several years, we have promoted and been able to leverage funds to ensure the completion of such projects like Olmsted Green in Mattapan, the South Bay expansion in Dorchester, the Jackson Square project in Jamaica Plain, but also economic development projects like Mass Robotics and Flextronics in the industrial park. With every fiscal year that comes out, the Executive Office of Housing and Development asks municipalities to choose priority projects that will further the goals of each municipality. And as we think about Mayor Walsh's goals around the Imagine Boston 2030, which looks at creating economic opportunity in all parts of the city, we look to utilize the MassWorks funds to ensure those goals. This year, we are seeking to support 3 projects through the MassWorks program, as mentioned earlier. 135 Dudley, which is one of the first of the planned Nubian Square Phase 1 projects. 125 Amory Street in Jamaica Plain, which fits within the context of Plan JP Rocks. And the Whittier Phase 3, which, as noted, is part of the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative, which the City of Boston was fortunate to be a recipient of. Through the MassWorks infrastructure program, we'll be able to leverage these funds working with private funding to ensure that there are significant amounts of affordable housing that are being built. Most of these projects are providing 2/3 affordability throughout their development, as well as significant job creation, not only through the construction of the MassWorks funded scope, but also through the construction of the project itself. I will stop my remarks there, and hopefully with your vote, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Good. Any questions of Dana? Hearing none, it's the pleasure of the board.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I also support the motion. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks very much.
26, request authorization to accept $703,526.25 from the Economic Development and Industrial Corporation of Boston's Brownfield Cleanup Fund for Building 108 in the Charlestown Navy Yard, and to enter into a grant agreement for said funds. Bob Luisi.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, board members. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine, Bob. Can hear you fine.
Okay. So earlier this evening, the board, there was a proposal made to the board to grant from EDIC to the BRA in the amount of $703,526.25 in order to help with a fairly substantial project over in the Navy Yard, and that's to demolish and the demolition and remediation cost of Building 108, an old power plant here. It has, cost well over $5 million, maybe as much as $8 million. and this grant will help pay for some of those efforts. So before you is the request to approve the grant from the BRA side.
Very good, thanks, Bob. Any questions of Bob? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I also vote with the motion. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, too.
Good.
Have a good evening.
Number 27, personnel, Jamie? There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. For the record, Jamie Lamarco with the Human Resources Department. We have some items for your consideration under the BRA agenda. We have one appointment, Michelle McCarthy, with a Housing Policy Manager in the Director's Office with a start date of September 8th, 2020. There's one status change, Casey Hines, Senior Project Manager within Development Review for a retroactive change in number of hours effective August 3rd, 2020. And one departure, Shayna Berry, Project Manager and Business Analyst within Management Information Systems with a resignation that took place July 31st. All the details of these personnel matters are listed within the board memo, and excuse me. I just need to shed light on one conflict of interest disclosure for approval and determination as disclosed by Director Golden himself. Now, normally the director would sign such a determination for employee disclosures by consideration, but this is his personal disclosure, so this must be approved by the board. All the details have been provided to you in the memos, and both Renee, our general counsel, and Brian are here to answer any of your questions or concerns regarding that matter.
Good, thank you, Jamie. Are there any questions of Jamie? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I also vote in favor of the motion.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Jamie. Number 28, contractual. Motion to pay the bills.
I move we pay our bills.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Downs?
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And I also vote in favor. Number 29, director's update. Brian, do you have anything?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to run through a couple things with you. Good evening to you. Good evening through you to the members. A few words on the diversity criteria associated with our request for proposals. There was a discussion earlier by Devin, Quirk, our Director of Real Estate Development, regarding our rejection of a variety of responses to RFPs seeking developers of BPDA owned land. There was also a discussion of it in the Boston Globe today, what we were doing and why we were doing it. So I'd like to follow up on our recent conversations that I've had with you in our formal board meetings about the agency's investment and commitment to diversity and inclusion. We're continuing to build on these efforts. That's why we're discussing this today. We're focusing on how we can use public land for the public good in the long term. Today, you authorized the reissuance and re-advertisement of requests for proposals for 3 separate developments on BPDA-owned property. Building 108 in the Charlestown Navy Yard, 142 Shawmut Avenue in the south end, and Charlestown's Main Street parcel. Simply put, they're not sufficiently identified detailed diversity and inclusion plans. While the proposals did include sufficient design and programmatic elements, the diversity and inclusion plans lacked specific measures to advance economic opportunities for people of color and women in real estate development and related fields. Additionally, the City of Boston and the BPDA are working to update the language in our RFPs going forward for public land to provide greater clarity on the expectations for submissions, further prioritize diversity and inclusion during the selection process, and strengthen the city and the BPDA's commitment to these equity and diversity goals. This includes language that the updated diversity and inclusion plan criteria will in fact comprise 25% of the evaluation of each proposal submitted. So the plan as qualitatively described will be weighted as 25%, up to 25% of the scoring for proposals that are submitted. So we're not only asking for responses to these demands, our expectations on diversity and inclusion, but we're seeking to quantify the value of that narrative description of a diversity plan in our evaluation process. So thanks to Devin, Quirk, our Director of Real Estate, and all his team for working on these RFPs, for scrutinizing the language, for rethinking what these RFPs should look like. We remain committed as ever to making Boston and the BPDA a leader in promoting diversity and inclusion and development. A couple times a week, we have early morning calls with the mayor to discuss COVID response. Literally every department head and a variety of staff in city government get on the call with the mayor multiple times per week. And this morning, our own research division discussed some of their analysis on economic impacts of COVID, specifically as it relates this morning's presentation to the city's restaurant industry. COVID and the economic distress that has flowed from COVID has certainly severely impacted our restaurant industry in the city of Boston. The Massachusetts Restaurant Association predicts that close to 4,000 of Massachusetts's 16,000 restaurants, so 25%, will likely close due to COVID. As of June 27th, almost 16,000 Boston residents working in public accommodations and food services claimed unemployment benefits. Most of these workers are low income, young, and immigrants. So very vulnerable populations impacted by this distress in the restaurant industry. When we look at what's going on inside the restaurants that are in fact operating right now, weekday seated diners who are going to restaurants for sit-down meals, are 75% lower, while weekend seated diners are 63% lower than was the case in August of 2019. And according to a BPDA commissioned next door poll, even with the lifting of government restrictions in recent weeks, 71% of consumers may lack confidence or funds and may not eat indoors at a restaurant in the next month. So this is a snapshot from our research division of what's happening in a key industry with an especially vulnerable population. And this distress is animating the city's response to the COVID crisis. We're focusing closely on this impact on restaurants and the hospitality industry, as well as many other severely impacted people and industries. And as part of our response to these very critical problems, the city continues to assist individuals and businesses through its Boston Resiliency Fund. So since launching it in March, since the mayor launched it in March, the fund has distributed over $24 million to more than 328 nonprofits and local organizations. 53% of grantee organizations are led by a person of color, and 56% of grantee organizations are led by a woman. This funding has helped organizations that are working to increase food access, assist individuals who are experiencing homelessness, as well as funding local organizations that either directly provide material support to Bostonians in need or service support. So the Resiliency Fund has distributed almost $25 million. It's raised over 30. So the effort is to get the money in and get it back out to our neighborhoods as soon as possible so that it can address real human needs. Finally, I want to share some really happy and exciting news about this year's 2020 Shattuck Public Service Awards, which are granted by the Boston Municipal Research Bureau every year in the fall. The Research Bureau commissions a Shattuck Award Selection Committee to identify worthy City of Boston public employees. The Shattuck Award is, of course, the Academy Award, the Oscar for public service in Boston. So it's a magnificent occurrence to celebrate the work of city employees for their dedicated service to the people of Boston. And this year, the Shattuck Award will be granted to the BPDA Senior Project Manager, John Campbell. He will receive the award in the fall. John's been with the agency. We just saw him a little earlier this evening presenting on some Article 80 projects. He's been with the agency for 2 decades, and we all felt very strongly about this nomination and now this award. John works hard in our neighborhoods and at City Hall. He's out working Article 80 through community processes. We hear consistently how neighborhood activists, civic groups, residents, development teams, stakeholders throughout the city really appreciate John, the work he does, the skill, the respect he shows to all, the fairness he demonstrates, in his diligence in getting quality development permitted that serves the needs of all our people in all our neighborhoods. So we get that kind of positive feedback a lot on John Campbell. We transmitted that story to the Boston Municipal Research Bureau, and John has been selected for the Shattuck Award. So we all congratulate John on this terrific recognition and all he's accomplished. With that concludes my report, and I hope the remaining days of August are good ones for all of you. Thanks very much, and good evening.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions of Brian? Hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
During this meeting.
Motion made and seconded. And roll call. Ms. Downs.
Aye.
Dr. Landsmark.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
And I also vote in favor of adjournment. So Teresa, Brian, unless you have anything else, I guess we're signing off, correct?
Correct. We're good
I
to
think
go.
we're good, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chairman.
Hey, guys, thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.